Chapter 400. She didn't know where this girl's confidence came from. She thought that as long as she hooked up with Ming Shi, he would kneel under her skirt, as if he had never seen a woman before. Zicheng was originally worried that Ming Shi would say something. If others knew what she had done, it would definitely damage her reputation. She couldn't bear to see her good reputation being damaged in the slightest. She didn't expect that what she was worried about didn't happen. Whether it was Ming Shi or Fengwu, neither of them said a word about what she had done on Bewitching Wind Island. They didn't even take the initiative to talk to her. This made Zicheng sigh in relief. At the same time, she was somewhat displeased. She wondered if the two of them were secretly looking down on her. If she had known that she would be discovered by Ming Shi and the others, she wouldn't have touched the demon-suppressing sword. Compared to the demon-suppressing sword, her good reputation, which could bring her countless favorability points, was the thing she should cherish the most. Senior, this is a sandwich made by Little Chung. It's delicious. I'll treat you to it. In order to hook up with Ming Shi, Eve eagerly took out the sandwich Zicheng gave her. She wanted to increase her favorability with Ming Shi. Unfortunately, Ming Shi didn't accept her kindness. No need, Junior Eve. I have food here. Food in the desert is precious. Junior should properly store this food. Although Ming Shi didn't want to accept Eve's kindness, his words were still beautiful. He didn't let Eve feel his displeasure. She thought that Ming Shi was really worried about her, and was afraid that she didn't have enough food. Eve, who thought that she was being treated differently, was delighted. She shyly said that she still had a lot of food. If Ming Shi didn't have enough food on him, she could give some to Ming Shi. Ming Shi still refused. Of course, he refused in a very graceful manner. No one would think that he didn't like Eve. Senior Ming Shi, I still have a lot of food here. If you don't have enough, I can share some with you. Zicheng saw that Ming Shi had learned to criticize her in front of so many people. She didn't hide from Ming Shi anymore and spoke openly. It was just that she didn't greet Ming Shi right from the start, which caused some people to have some guesses in their hearts. They probably guessed that the relationship between the two wasn't very good. Of course, no one said these words out loud. No need, I have enough food on me. Ming Shi's expression was indifferent. His polite smile didn't change at all. No one could guess what he was thinking. Zicheng was a little disappointed that Ming Shi didn't accept her kindness. Fortunately, she wasn't a pestering person. If Ming Shi didn't accept, she wouldn't keep pestering him to accept her kindness. Little Chung, is this your senior? Caesar noticed Ming Shi as soon as he entered the cave. Ming Shi's appearance was definitely not something that could be ignored. Although the people in this world valued strength more, who could say that appearance wasn't important? He was guessing which family's young master such a peerlessly handsome man was from, or which royal family's descendant. He didn't expect that this person was actually Zicheng and Eve's senior. This is our Notre Dame du Starlight's fifth-year chief Ming Shi. Zicheng introduced her. Senior Ming Shi, this is my friend Caesar. As for Caesar's true identity, she didn't say much. Ming Shi still gave face to Zicheng and greeted Caesar in a friendly manner. The two of them didn't chat much, and just sat down to rest. On the other hand, Elena and the others chatted with Zicheng and the others. From Zicheng, they learned quite a lot about Ming Shi. Of course, Zicheng also learned their names, and how they met Ming Shi. He even told them about the secrets of the tomb of the god of sin that he learned from Fengwu. Elena and the others weren't fools. They naturally had their own considerations for telling them this. If they wanted to leave this Sand Country's territory, the more people they could bring with them the better. They had already guessed how dangerous the road ahead would be. It wouldn't be wrong to bring a few more people with them at this time. Telling them these things was like giving face to Zicheng and the others. After Caesar, Juanza, and the others found out about the tomb of the emperor, they were also shocked. They didn't think that the truth would be like this. They didn't think that this group of people would lie to them, because there was no need to. After knowing the secrets of the tomb of the emperor, Caesar and the others felt a little heavy. The development of the situation had exceeded their expectations. No one would have thought that the sea god would be such a vicious and merciless god. No matter what they thought, the alliance between the two groups could be considered to have been achieved. The snowstorm outside was still very strong, but it was very warm inside the cave. Fengwu took out a blanket from her spatial ring, then leaned against Mingxi and sat beside the fire. The warm blanket was draped over the two of them. Mingxi had wanted to refuse, but Fengwu's aggrieved and serious expression made it hard for him to say no. They leaned against each other for warmth. Mingxi could feel the warmth from Fengwu's body, and his heart softened. Elena, May, Irene, and Eve didn't feel good when they saw this scene. They wanted to squeeze their way over, but they couldn't bring themselves to do so. They could only watch and sulk. They even cursed Fengwu over 800 times in their hearts, cursing her for being shameless and seducing men. The night passed slowly with everyone having their own thoughts. The next day, Mingxi and Fengwu woke up early in the morning. Because it was too hot, the two of them were almost woken up by the heat. Mingxi was a little surprised. He actually slept so soundly. He clearly knew how dangerous the environment was. But he actually fell asleep. Mingxi didn't dare to imagine. If someone had the intention to kill and steal, they might accidentally die in this place. If that happened, they wouldn't even have a place to cry. Fortunately, nothing happened last night. As he breathed a sigh of relief, he also made up his mind to not let the same thing happen again. The sun in the morning was relatively warm, only about 30 degrees. Everyone ate something, and immediately set off to search for the ancient desert city mentioned in the notification. They walked in the desert. Fortunately, there were many smart people in this team, and they didn't go in the wrong direction. Following this direction, it shouldn't be a problem to find the ancient desert city. After walking in this endless desert for nearly 10 days, they still didn't see a building similar to a city. Although they found some oases, they were surrounded by evil spirits and were full of danger. Under Fengwu's suggestion, everyone didn't go near them. Fuck, how many days has it been? We still haven't found that damn ancient desert city. Where is it? We still can't find it after so long. Chapter 401. That's right. We don't have anything to eat anymore. If we can't find anything, we'll starve to death. This was a temporary team of about 7 people. They were all people who were teleported into the desert dungeon. Because they were on the same route, they formed a temporary alliance to search for the so-called ancient desert city together. There was not much food left for the 7 of them. After days of running around and the danger of food, these people looked a little haggard. Stop talking. There are people coming over there. Let's go and ask if they have anything to eat. If they do, we'll buy some first. Someone said excitedly when he saw people approaching from afar. Stop joking. Buy food. Do you think someone would be so stupid as to sell the food that they rely on to survive in the desert? I think it would be better for us to rob them directly. The 7 of us are all experts. There are also several women in their group who look weak at first glance. It won't be easy to rob them. This person sneered and said his thoughts aloud. These people thought about it and agreed. If there were real things, the possibility of them selling it to them was almost zero. Instead of wasting time talking about buying food, it was better to rob them. Therefore, this group of 7 men planned their first robbery since they worked together. Who would have thought that what they wanted to rob was not some amazing magical equipment, nor was it some divine weapon? It was just the most ordinary food. Mingxi and the others did not know that they had become fat sheep in the eyes of some people. Recently, although Mingxi and the others did not find any clues about the ancient desert city, they were not worried about food. This was because in their team, whether it was Fengwu or Zicheng, they were used to carrying a lot of food with them. Zicheng was in the food business, so it was not strange that he had so much food in his storage space. Fengwu was used to being fed by others, because she was a foodie. She had more food than Zicheng. Just like that, the group that didn't have to worry about food met the group of 7 that was constantly worrying about whether they would starve to death. Stop, hand over your food. Not far in front of Mingxi, a large man wielding a saber suddenly appeared. This large man held a saber that was half the height of a person and stood in front of Mingxi in an awe-inspiring manner. A gust of wind blew past, lifting up the man's long hair, revealing a haggard face covered in stubble. That's right. Hand over all your food. Hand over the food, and I won't kill you. One by one, 7 people dressed in non-mainstream clothing appeared, carrying all kinds of weapons. Some were wielding axes. Some were wielding swords, some were wielding broadswords, some were wielding whips, and some were wielding ordinary magic swords. Of course, there were also those wielding magic staffs. The 7 of them stood in a row with different weapons in their hands. Their stomachs growled from time to time, coupled with the sour smell that came from the fact that they hadn't bathed for a few days, their manly oily hair, and their completely shapeless clothes that seemed to be from the beggar clan. No matter how one looked at them, they didn't look like normal people. Ming Shi and the others were speechless. Were these guys sent by monkeys to make fun of him? Who are you trying to rob when you're so hungry that you can't even walk? Although Elena sympathized with these guys, she didn't want to share her food with them. This was the desert. Without food, one would starve to death sooner or later. She didn't want to starve to death. There were quite a few people who had the same idea as her. No one said anything. No one wanted to help a bunch of idiots who they didn't know well at this time. 100 gold coins for a bag of food and 200 gold coins for a bag of water. If you want it, then trade. Just as Elena was thinking about how she couldn't give her food to these guys, the Fengwu girl stood up. Seeing these hungry guys and not sensing any killing intent from them, the Fengwu girl decided to sell them some food. Of course, the price was 100 times higher than outside. Okay. We'll buy it. We have money. The 7 idiots were so excited that they threw away their weapons. God knew that each of them only had 1 biscuit left. This was the food that was distributed to everyone at the beginning. At most, it could last them for 2 more days. Now that they couldn't find anything to eat, they could only starve to death. At this moment, the Fengwu girl, who sold them precious food, was as kind as a goddess. Although this goddess's price was a little expensive, they weren't afraid of the price. They were only afraid that they wouldn't be able to buy it. Originally, they wanted to steal a portion of the food to tide them over. They didn't want to kill anyone. They weren't murderers. They wouldn't kill anyone just to steal food. They didn't expect to be so lucky. The robbery had just begun, and there was already a kind person who was willing to sell them food. There were still many kind people in this world. They started to believe in love again. The 7 men were afraid that the Fengwu girl would change her mind. They quickly took out their money to buy food. Fengwu girl had a lot of food and water. Her biggest hobby was collecting food. Although the food she collected wasn't too expensive, it was enough to keep them hungry. No, I don't agree with you selling food to them. This food belongs to our team. If you sell it to them, what about the rest of us? Irene May glared at Fengwu girl angrily. Her accusing eyes made it seem as if Fengwu girl had done something outrageous. The 7 men also glared at Irene May. Where did this stinky woman come from? Didn't she know that stealing food from a tiger's mouth would be punished? This is mine. Fengwu girl looked back at Irene May seriously. She refused to admit that her food was the shared property of the team. You're a member of our team. The food you have should be considered the shared property of all of us. You don't have the right to sell it. This strange theory made Fengwu girl blink her eyes. Fengwu girl looked at the self-righteous girl with a strange expression. Elena and the others behind May Irene girl looked uncomfortable. Although they didn't agree with Fengwu girl's method of selling food, they didn't have the face to say such a strange theory. There's something wrong with your brain. She stared at May Irene girl seriously for a long time, before saying with a solemn expression, "Pfft." Many of them couldn't help but laugh, especially the 7 men, who had almost lost their food when May Irene girl interrupted their transaction. The resentment of food was very scary. Ahahaha. This is the first time I've heard such a strange theory in my life. I just found out that a team has to share everything with others. Chapter 402. Ahahaha. This is the first time I've heard such a weird theory in my life. I just found out that a small team has to share everything with the others. Why doesn't she share her man with us? What kind of man can she have with that kind of character? She looks like a jinx to her husband. That's right. Ugly people are always mischievous. Ha 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 ha. She really has a hole in her head. The 7 robbers laughed without restraint. Although the others wanted to laugh as well, they didn't laugh out loud to give Irene May some face. Only the 7 of them wouldn't give a girl any face. You. Irene May glared at the 7 of them with a venomous expression. She wished she could go up and kill them. If it weren't for her rationality, She might really have rushed up to them. What about us? Woman with a hole in her head. That's right, that's right. You have a hole in your head. Each one of them had a hole in their head. Fengwu Mei Irene Mei shouldn't have stopped you from making a deal with others. But she's doing it for everyone's sake. Without food, I'll starve to death here. Before you sell your food, can't you think for all of us? Although Eileen's voice was very gentle, and even had a hint of pleading, Fengwu Mei could tell that Eileen was on Irene Mei's side. Fengwu Mei blinked her big eyes, feeling wronged. These are my things. Why should I think for you? We're not friends. She didn't care if these words would offend others, she just said it. However, the Fengwu girl remembered that Mingxi was also here, so she changed her words. Senior Mingxi is a good friend. As she spoke, the girl's eyes had a hint of fawning, as if she was afraid that Mingxi would be angry with her. Mingxi was angry and amused at the same time. He rubbed her head to show that he wasn't angry. Fengwu breathed a sigh of relief, and her mood soared. Among these people, the Fengwu girl only cared about Mingxi. Other than Mingxi, the others were just strangers to her. Oh, and Zicheng and Eve weren't strangers to her. But they were just ordinary classmates who were slightly better than strangers. Although Fengwu's words were not pleasant to hear, it was true. They just met by chance and were not really friends. Although this was something that everyone knew, no one would say it out loud. Of course, Fengwu girl was an exception. Fengwu girl's words left Elena speechless. She pulled Mei Irene, who was about to have a stroke, to the back of the crowd. She didn't care what Fengwu did with the food. Zicheng wanted to speak up for Elena and the others, but she was more afraid of angering Fengwu and causing her to spout nonsense. If that happened, it would be bad. So this time, Zicheng remained silent. Even when Eve wanted to help Elena and the others, she was stopped by Zicheng. She successfully traded some food to the 7 non-mainstream people. The 7 of them were just short of hugging her leg and calling her a goddess. Although Elena and the others weren't too happy, they didn't say anything. They didn't want to be attacked indiscriminately by Fengwu again. The 7 of them were much more confident after receiving food and water. They volunteered to join Fengwu's team and move with them. Thus, Fengwu's team grew stronger again. It was a good thing that the team grew stronger, but they still couldn't find any clues about the ancient desert city. Baby, what do we do? We can't find it. Fengwu said listlessly. It was too hot during the day and too cold at night. Fengwu, who had always lived on Mount Yuehua, was very uncomfortable. Don't worry. Let me take a look. Baby was also anxious. He hated this kind of hot place. Even lying on Fengwu's head to sleep, he was worried that he would be roasted when he woke up. Baby tried his best to use his power to predict the future, hoping to find the location of the ancient desert city. After Baby's hard work, she finally saw some scenes of the future. Sandstorms, quicksand whirlpools, underground cities, white bones. These images appeared in Baby's mind. Through these images, he roughly knew why everyone couldn't find the ancient desert city. The ancient desert city had been buried in the yellow sand tens of thousands of years ago. If one wanted to find it, they would have to rely on luck. Otherwise, no one would be able to dig a hole in the desert to find the buried city. Fengwu and the others, on the other hand, were all lucky. Don't worry. You will find the place soon. Baby said confidently. Oh, Fengwu nodded. She was quite happy. Wait. At this time, the spirit of the emperor suddenly called out to Fengwu. What's wrong? Fengwu turned around. I sensed the Tsar's aura. He is nearby. The spirit of the emperor could sense each other. They didn't sense the spirit of the emperor, but the emperor's aura. Only the emperor's aura would have the emperor's aura. Where is he? Fengwu asked. Baby was amazing. He was so accurate. He found it immediately. Baby, no, this has nothing to do with me. The spirit of the emperor pointed in a direction, but it wasn't the direction they were going. Fengwu, of course, believed in the spirit of the emperor. She immediately walked over and pulled Mingxi's clothes. The direction is wrong. We should go this way. Fengwu pointed with a serious face. This way. Mingxi was a little surprised. This was the first time Fengwu pointed out a direction. In the past, when everyone discussed the direction, she didn't participate. Could it be that Fengwu found something? Mingxi, of course, believed in Fengwu. In his opinion, Fengwu could always bring about miracles. She was a girl who could bring about miracles. Okay. Fengwu nodded. Let's go this way. Mingxi thought for 2 seconds and directly announced the change of direction. Wait, Senior Mingxi. Why do we have to listen to Fengwu? Clearly, the direction of the discussion yesterday was not in this direction. Eve thought that she had to follow Fengwu's instructions again, and felt uncomfortable. This reminded her of the entrance exam. At that time, everyone also listened to Fengwu and looked down on her. That's right. Why should we listen to her? Mei Irene also stood out and pointed at Fengwu. If you have any objections, you can go back the way you came, Mingxi said lightly, not taking the 2 girls' accusations to heart. Mei Irene and Eve looked at each other and didn't dare to speak. They didn't like Fengwu, but they definitely didn't want to separate from Mingxi. Caesar and the others didn't have any objections to changing directions. After all, they couldn't find where the ancient desert city was after more than 10 days. Maybe they could find it by changing directions. No one came out to stop them. Everyone changed direction and continued to move forward. The spirit of the emperor led the way in front. Fengwu would occasionally ask everyone to turn around or something. It looked like she was the one leading the way. There was no other way. After all, everyone couldn't see the spirit of the emperor. Chapter 403. No one came out to stop them. Everyone changed direction and continued to move forward. The spirit of the emperor led the way in front. Fengwu would occasionally ask everyone to take a turn or something. It looked like she was the one leading the way. There was no other way. After all, no one could see the spirit of the emperor. They walked for half a day, and the sun was getting bigger and bigger. They had to find a place to hide from the sun, or their bodies might not be able to take it. They had been like this for the past 10 days. They hurried in the morning and found a place to rest in the afternoon and night. They didn't have much time to hurry, because the weather didn't allow it. Are we there yet? Bao Bao flew beside Fengwu and asked listlessly. We should be there soon. My senses are getting stronger and stronger. We won't be too far away, the king's spirit said. Let's find a place to rest. The sun is too strong. We can't go any further. Zicheng wiped the sweat off his forehead. His forehead was covered in sweat. Little Cheng is right. It's too hot. I can't walk anymore. Eve drank a big mouthful of water. Her cheeks were red like a drunk person, as if she had a heat stroke. Let's go over there. There's a big tree over there. We can set up camp under it. Caesar felt bad for Zicheng, so he turned around and said to everyone. The others didn't have any objections and agreed with Caesar. In this desert, green plants were not common, especially this kind of tree that was a few meters tall. He didn't know what kind of species this tree was, but from the fact that it could grow luxuriantly in the desert, it could be seen that this tree had a very strong vitality. Fengwu still couldn't hear the sound of plants. Although she was a little disappointed, she still pulled herself together and set up the tents with everyone. Fengwu sold the tents at a high price. After all, Fengwu was the only one among them who could store such things in the space ring. The group of them set up tents under the big tree. Fengwu and Mingxi stayed together, while the others were assigned to their own tents. However, everyone stayed with the people they were familiar with and trusted. Of course, those who wanted to stay by themselves could also pay for their own tents. It was actually very stuffy to be cooped up in the tent on such a hot day. Fortunately, this was a magical world. Anything could be solved with magic, including lowering the temperature in the room. Only a small magic tool was needed to adjust the temperature of the room. Therefore, they wouldn't feel stuffy living in a tent. Instead, they could get a good rest. Xiao Wu, there's a lake in front. Do you want to take a bath with us? Feng Li's voice suddenly came from outside the tent. Fengwu and Mingxi walked out of the tent and saw Feng Li standing outside. Zicheng, Eve, Mei, Irene and Elena were also there. There's a lake in front. Mingxi was a little surprised. He didn't expect to be lucky enough to find a lake. Yes, there is. Little Cheng and I were just going to check out the terrain over there. We didn't expect to find a lake as soon as we crossed the sand dune. The lake isn't very big, but the water quality is pretty good, Eve answered Mingxi happily. The news of Zicheng and the others finding a lake had attracted the attention of everyone in the temporary team. What they lacked the most in the desert was food. Now that they had found a drinkable water source, the first thing they wanted to do was to replenish their supplies. The girls, on the other hand, wanted to jump into the water and have a good bath. None of the men present objected to their desire to take a bath. However, everyone made a request. They had to wait until the water was ready. If they let them take a bath now, wouldn't they be drinking their own bathwater in the future? Fengwu also wanted to take a bath. Although people who practice magic and doqi only needed to use these two types of energy to cleanse their bodies, and didn't need to bathe in water, it still felt weird to not bathe in water. Especially for Zicheng and Fengwu, who were used to bathing in water since they were young, it felt weird not to bathe in water. One by one, the men took the empty water bags to the lakeside to fill them with water. The girls were already waiting by the lakeside, waiting for them to get the water, so that they could bathe together. Mingxi and the others came to the lake to take a look. Sure enough, it was a clean lake. There didn't seem to be any problems with the water. After confirming that there was no problem with the lake water, the men moved quickly. They didn't let the girls wait for too long before they filled up all the water bags. After the men left, the girls took off their clothes one by one and jumped into the water. Although the sun was shining brightly outside, the water was still slightly cool. After jumping into the water, they felt great. I feel like I've finally come back to life. Elena happily enjoyed the slight coolness of the lake water. At this moment, she felt her whole body relax. Me too. I can finally take a good bath in the water. Although I've been using magic to cleanse my body every day for the past 2 days, I still feel sticky. I don't know if it's just my imagination. Heavens, my hands and neck are all tanned. Fengli cried out in surprise. She touched her tanned hands and wailed. I'm tanned too. Zicheng stared at his arms in distress. His skin exposed to the air was much darker than the skin under his clothes. It seemed that he would have to spend some time whitening his skin after leaving. Fengwu, you're not tanned at all. Fengli looked at Fengwu's hands in disbelief. The girls' necks, faces, and hands were all heavily sunburned. Although the degree of their skin was different, they were all tanned. Fengwu was the only one who didn't usually notice it. However, after taking a closer look, her skin didn't seem to have changed at all. Not to mention getting tanned, her skin wasn't even dehydrated. She looked exactly the same as usual. There was no difference at all. This was a perfect way to attract hatred. As a result, Fengwu immediately became the target of an interrogation. Everyone was very interested in the secrets of how she took care of her skin. There was no woman in the world who wasn't afraid of being old and ugly. No matter how strong a woman was, they were all interested in the secrets of beauty. Tell us, how did you take care of your skin? How did you take care of your skin so well? You didn't get tanned at all. Fengli usually didn't have any major conflicts with Fengwu. Unlike Eve, Mei, and Irene, she didn't find it difficult to ask directly. The two of them often caused trouble for Fengwu. Now that they were asked to ask Fengwu about her secret skincare, they knew without asking that Fengwu definitely wouldn't tell them. Fengwu, tell us about it. We're all very interested. Zicheng held Fengwu's hand and said with a natural smile. Fengwu blinked. What skincare? The Fengwu girls seriously lacked common knowledge when it came to things that girls knew. Chapter 404. What is maintenance? Can it be eaten? Stop pretending. If you don't want to say it, then don't say it. It's just a secret maintenance recipe. What's so great about it? Eve saw that Fengwu did not give Zicheng any face at all. Zicheng had condescended to ask her, and she still dared to pretend that she did not understand. She was indeed a bitch. She was not even willing to share a single maintenance recipe. Eve was not the only one who was dissatisfied with Fengwu. Because of Mingxi, Elena and Mei Irene were also hostile towards Fengwu. It was just that one of them did not show it, while the other showed it on their faces. That's right. Stop pretending. If you don't want to say it, then don't say it. It's as if someone wants to take your recipe for free. Mei Irene also looked at Fengwu with disdain, as if she was really a stingy and selfish woman. Mei Irene had never thought that she would take Fengwu's recipe for free. She did not plan to pay any price at all. Alright, Mei Irene. Fengwu is probably not saying it, because this recipe is related to her family's business. Let's not force Fengwu. How about this? Fengwu, how many maintenance products do you have? We'll all buy them from you. What do you think? Elena had always been very rational and considerate, in order to show others that she was considerate in front of others. Even in front of the annoying Fengwu, she still had to maintain her demeanor. May Irene saw this and sneered in her heart. Pretending? Who doesn't know your true colors? However, she continued to agree. All right, Fengwu. This time, you can't say that you don't have any more. I don't know what you're talking about. Fengwu shook her head and threw a confused look at them. Fengwu couldn't be blamed for this. This girl had never bought those expensive skincare products in her entire life. How could a girl like Fengwu, who had never taken care of herself, share her sunscreen skincare experience with others? All the girls were a little angry. Fengwu, what do you mean? We already said that we will give you money. Are you still worried that we won't give you money? Eve glared at Fengwu. That's right. What's the meaning of this? Do you not want to sell it to us? May Irene said angrily. Zicheng and Elena didn't look too happy either. However, both of them were people who cared about their image. If someone didn't want to sell it to them, they couldn't force them to. The two of them would never do something that would lower their status and ruin their image. As for Fengli, although she was disappointed, she wasn't angry. However, Fengwu's act of playing dumb still made Fengli choose to watch coldly from the sidelines. She didn't help Fengwu. In the end, she was still a little angry. In fact, they had wronged Fengwu girl. When she said that she didn't know, she wasn't pretending. She really didn't know. Logically speaking, it was normal to get tanned under the sun every day. It would be abnormal if she didn't get tanned. However, Fengwu had a cute pet called White Lotus. White Lotus had its own cooling and anti-ultraviolet radiation properties. She wore White Lotus on her wrist every day like a bracelet, so it was normal that she didn't get tanned. However, these girls didn't know this and thought that Fengwu had secretly used some miraculous sunscreen skincare products. Because of the skincare products, Fengwu's narrow-mindedness had angered everyone. Unknowingly, Fengwu was isolated. Fortunately, Fengwu wasn't a girl with a fragile heart. She wouldn't hide and cry, because she was isolated by the girls. The girls who were talking about the skincare products just now didn't notice that there was a large dark cloud in the distance that was quickly approaching. Everyone come over here. Something bad has happened. The girls who were playing in the water heard someone shout. They immediately took out clean clothes and changed into them before running over as fast as they could. The person who shouted was one of the 7 young men. He was sweating profusely as he looked at Fengwu and the others running over. Quick, let's go. Something bad has happened. As soon as the young man finished speaking, he immediately called out to Fengwu and ran. It really looked like something urgent had happened. Zicheng and the others' hearts tightened. They followed the young man and ran to the campsite where they had set up camp. When the girls noticed the campsite, they realized that the tents had been put away. The men's expressions were a little strange. It's good that we got them back. Everyone, let's get out of here. Mingxi stepped forward, grabbed Wu's hand, and ran quickly in a direction. Caesar also pulled Zicheng and strode after them. What happened? Elena asked in confusion, as she followed the few men she was familiar with. Don't mention it. There's a sandstorm coming soon. We have to get out of here quickly. The one who answered her question was Olafman. Sandstorm? Elena, May, and Irene were all shocked, but they immediately sped up. After knowing what kind of danger awaited them, no one dared to stop. If they didn't leave quickly and find a place to hide, they were afraid that they would be buried alive by the sandstorm. Huff huff. Everyone panted and ran forward with all their might. It's in this direction. I feel like we're getting closer and closer. The spirit of the emperor led thousands of spirits behind Fengwu and ran together. It's true. Bao Bao was overjoyed. Great, we're finally here. Senior Mingxi, it's right in front. Fengwu immediately told this good news to Mingxi. Mingxi was stunned. He didn't ask why Fengwu knew this. He only nodded to show that he understood. Mingxi and Fengwu sped up at the same time, and the others immediately followed. At this time, they could see a large patch of dark clouds and sandstorm moving forward quickly behind them. If Mingxi and the others couldn't find a place to hide, they might be in danger. They flipped over a sand dune, and just as they were sliding down the dune, They didn't expect to see a quicksand whirlpool. Fengwu and the others only had time to scream. They didn't even have time to escape before they were sucked into the quicksand whirlpool. Plop! The sound of water dripping could be heard from time to time. Fengwu opened her eyes, but found that there was no light around her. She summoned a magic prop for illumination, and soon Fengwu's surroundings were lit up. Bones, endless bones. Fengwu found that she was lying on a piece of white, and not far from Fengwu, there was a group of people. These people were the temporary team members who fell down with her. At this time, Mingxi also woke up. He looked at the surrounding environment, and the first thing he wanted to do was to find Fengwu. Finding that Fengwu was fine and woke up like him, Mingxi was secretly relieved. Let's wake everyone up first, Mingxi said. Fengwu nodded, and the two went to wake up the people who fell down one by one. Zicheng was the third to wake up, and Caesar was the fourth. These two, as the original male and female lead, didn't need others to wake them up, they could wake up by themselves. Chapter 405. Juanza also felt someone slapping his face. He had been woken up by the slap, and the first person he saw after waking up was Fengwu. He had many questions to ask, but before he could ask, Fengwu had already used the same method to wake up the other unconscious girls. What is this place? How did we get here? Heavens! So many bones! I want to leave this place. I don't want to stay here. May Irene screamed in fear. I don't want to stay here either. This place is too scary. I want to leave. Eve was so scared that she was about to cry, thinking about how she had been unconscious in a pile of bones, and how she was now stepping on bones. She felt terrible. This is the ancient desert city. Amidst the panicked screams, Fengwu's calm voice was very attention-grabbing, and at the same time calming. The ancient desert city. This is the ancient desert city. Everyone was shocked. No one had expected the legendary ancient desert city to be a place piled with bones. What do we do now, little Chung? Are we going to leave this place? Eve scowled miserably, looking listless. Deep in her eyes, one could see the obvious fear. No, if this is really the ancient desert city, we can't leave, Zicheng said, forcing herself to be calm. No matter how great a cheat Zicheng had gotten, it couldn't change the fact that she was just a girl from a civilized world who had never seen so many bones before. No matter how calm Zicheng appeared, it was impossible for her not to feel anything. However, Zicheng was the original female lead after all. She adjusted her state of mind very well, and quickly regained her composure. The others, on the other hand, found it difficult to calm down. They were all very agitated, especially the girls. That's right, it wasn't easy to find the ancient desert city. There's no reason for us to leave. Caesar's eyes darkened, and a trace of determination flashed across them. Eve didn't say anything else, but she was still scared. She could only hold Zicheng's hand tightly, hoping that Zicheng would give her some courage. Zicheng patted her hand to comfort her, but his eyes were looking around. So many people had died here, it was definitely not a good place. What was the purpose of letting them come here? At this moment, in this underground city, a row of white mist-like words suddenly appeared out of thin air. Welcome to the second stage. Please find the exit in the ancient desert city, and leave this place. Find the exit and leave. If that's the case, then it is indeed this place. This was good news for everyone. At the same time, it also indicated that more danger was gradually approaching them. Strange, there are only bones here, but there is no killing intent. This shouldn't be. Bao Bao looked at the bones in confusion. Logically speaking, this place should have accumulated a large amount of baleful aura. Unexpectedly, there was not even a little bit of baleful aura. It was simply unbelievably clean. Bao Bao wouldn't think that this was a good place just because there wasn't any killing intent. On the contrary, the lack of killing intent was the biggest problem. The danger level of this Sand Emperor's tomb was definitely higher than the first tomb Fengwu had gone to. Senior Mingxi, what are you looking at? Eve was very scared at first. She inadvertently turned her head and glanced over, only to see Mingxi squatting down to look at the bones. Her heart skipped a beat, and she couldn't help but ask. Mingxi looked up at her and replied calmly, I'm observing their cause of death. These people died very strangely. Strangely? Mingxi, did you discover something? Juanza also leaned over curiously. Most of the men leaned over to see what Mingxi had discovered. The girls were still a little scared. Other than Fengwu, Zicheng, and Fengli, no other girls dared to lean over. Look at these bones. Do you see anything wrong with these bones? Mingxi asked without turning his head. Problem? Juanza also grabbed a bone to take a look. There was nothing wrong. He looked at the bones again, from head to toe. Gradually, he realized that something was wrong. These bones don't have any scars. This way of death is too strange. Juanza also looked at the bones with a grave expression. What? No scars. Then how did they die? Did they all die from the plague? No, they might have been poisoned. The group started to make guesses about how these bones died. But no matter how they guessed, they didn't know if they were right. Let's leave this place first. There's a city gate in front. Let's go in first. Mingxi pointed at the majestic city wall in front of them. The city wall was very tall, about a few dozen meters tall. Behind that huge wall should be the legendary ancient desert city. Above the city gate, there were indeed the words Ancient Desert City carved on it. No one had any objections to entering the ancient desert city. They all walked forward. They all knew that if they wanted to leave, they would have to enter the ancient desert city to find clues. Mingxi held Fengwu's hand and walked in front as usual. The spirit of the emperor kept looking in the direction of the city gate with an ugly expression. I didn't expect that he would be willing to use such a method to obtain eternal life. The spirit of the emperor muttered to himself. Fengwu didn't notice what he said. When they reached the city gate, they realized that there were a few people there. These people had obviously come earlier than them, but they didn't enter. It was obvious that something had happened. More people are here. This is great. Everyone is trapped in this godforsaken place. A middle-aged man said with a smile. Sigh. A young man sighed, but his expression was numb. The others didn't say anything. They just looked at them strangely. You guys are also here to look for the ancient desert city. Why don't you go in? Sherrod asked curiously. Sigh, how do you know that we didn't go in? It's because we went in that nearly half of the people died. The people in front of you now are just survivors who just escaped from the city. The middle-aged man said listlessly. You guys have entered the city. Is it very dangerous in the city? What is it like in the city? Are there many monsters attacking you? Hurry up and tell us. The more we know, the higher the chances of everyone passing together. These people talked one after another, trying to get more information from the middle-aged man. Big brother, can you tell us what happened in the city? Mingxi asked on behalf of everyone. Everyone looked at the man expectantly. 2 days ago, our temporary team and I were the first batch of people to arrive here. After we arrived, we immediately entered this ancient desert city. There was clearly no one in the city, but we felt like we were being watched by countless people. Later, people started to go missing. The missing people couldn't even find their bodies. We were afraid that there was something strange in the city, so we left the city. We didn't expect something even more terrifying to happen at this time. Chapter 406. Although this person explained, Mingxi and the others finally understood what had happened. Just 2 days ago, the middle-aged man and the others came to the ancient desert city. Although they felt that this place was not a good place, in order to pass the second test, they had to enter the city. There were only a bunch of buildings in the city, and these buildings were very well preserved. There was no dust in the city at all. It did not look like a city that had disappeared for 10,000 years. The middle-aged man and the others split up in the city to find a way to leave, but something strange happened. Some of them began to disappear. Not only could they not find the bodies of the missing people, but they also could not find any traces of fighting. The disappearance of those people was very strange. There were no clues at all. The middle-aged man and the others didn't dare to split up. The group gathered together, but they still felt that their movements were being watched. As experts with considerable strength in the outside world, they actually couldn't find out where the person who was watching them was. To ensure everyone's safety, the group retreated from the city gate. After leaving the city, the feeling of being watched finally disappeared. Just as they breathed a sigh of relief, something even more unbelievable happened. Outside the city, in the open space where the bones were piled up like a mountain, a red light suddenly appeared. With the appearance of the red light, the bones underground seemed to come alive. Their bodies began to emit an endless murderous aura. If one could hear the sound of fighting on the battlefield, the messy human bones began to condense into complete white bones. These skeletons were all holding swords and sabers. Their pupilless eyes emitted 2 rays of red light. Under the horrified gazes of the people, all the skeletons unhesitatingly rushed towards the people standing outside the city gate with their weapons. The middle-aged men were shocked and panicked. There were so many white bones that they could not deal with. The middle-aged man and the others had no choice but to return to the ancient desert city. The moment they returned, the feeling of being watched appeared again. Some people began to disappear. Some people had clearly seen people next to them a second ago, but in the blink of an eye, they were gone. No one knew how they disappeared. They had no choice. When they could not stay in the city, they had to leave again. Fortunately, these white bones would only change when the red light appeared. Usually they were just ordinary white bones. After 2 days, the group of middle-aged men went from 12 people to 6 people. In just 2 days, this group of men was about to have a mental breakdown. Red light? Did you see what was emitting that light? Mingxi felt that the red lights were not simple, but he could not figure out what they were. He hoped that he could get some useful information from the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man shook his head. He didn't see much and didn't know where the red light came from. I remember that when the red light appeared, I vaguely saw a blood moon appear right above those white bones. A young man beside him said with uncertainty, "Blood moon." Mingxi and the others stared at the man in disbelief. The blood moon was recorded in some books in Heavenly Wind Continent. The blood moon was not a real moon. It was just a moon-like object formed by a trace of the essence of the moon and a baleful aura. The blood moon would only appear in places with extreme yin qi. Wherever the blood moon appeared, it would definitely be an extremely dangerous place. If one entered such a dangerous place, they would definitely die. Moreover, due to the existence of the blood moon, it was extremely easy for demonic creatures to breed in these places. Moreover, the level of the demonic creatures produced in the blood moon was not low. It was because they thought of this that they were so shocked when they heard the young man's words. "Blood moon? Are you sure it's the blood moon?" The middle-aged man grabbed the young man's clothes agitatedly, his expression extremely terrified. The young man nodded his head vigorously, confirming that he had not seen wrongly. "Why didn't you say so earlier?" The middle-aged man grabbed the young man's clothes in shock and anger. "I just didn't want everyone to be more afraid." The young man complained for himself, feeling wronged. He just didn't want the already frightened birds to be more frightened. The middle-aged man let go dejectedly, knowing that the young man's words were reasonable. If they had let others know about the blood moon in that kind of situation, the survivors would have lost even more courage and hope to live. Not good. Red light. Suddenly, someone in the middle-aged man's group shouted in panic. The middle-aged man and others reacted very quickly. As soon as the man shouted, they opened the door and rushed in. Mingxi and others looked back. It was indeed the mysterious red light that the middle-aged man had said. Mingxi also saw that the young man was probably not lying. There was indeed a blood moon in the sky. The blood moon would regularly release evil qi to control these bones. This was also the reason why Fengwu did not see any evil qi at all. Because the evil qi had been absorbed by the blood moon, of course, she could not see any evil qi. "Let's go." Mingxi let everyone into the city. With the closing of the city gate, the bone soldiers who had climbed out of the pile of bones disappeared from everyone's eyes. Everyone leaned against the city gate and finally breathed a big sigh of relief. The people who were glad to have escaped a disaster did not find that from the moment they came in, Fengwu's eyes had changed. In the eyes of others, the city was an empty space, but in Fengwu's eyes, it was a sea of people. A lot of spirits looked at them coldly in front of them. And what was even more terrible was that all the spirits here looked exactly the same. Yes, all the spirits in the desert city had the same face. This was simply impossible, but it still happened, and it happened in front of Fengwu's eyes. She could not believe it even if she did not want to. "Who are you?" Fengwu looked at these people quietly, her eyes full of doubts. Why were there so many people who looked exactly the same looking at them? Fengwu was very puzzled. She could not understand why she chose to directly look at those people. She did not feel any resentment from these people, nor did she feel any evil qi or unwillingness. This was very wrong. There was no unwillingness, evil qi, or resentment. It showed that they were worried when they died. It was impossible for a free spirit to stay in the world for a long time. If they did not have a contract with the necromancer, they would be sent to reincarnation by the rules of the earth. But these spirits in front of her, each of them seemed to have no problem at all. But they did not reincarnate. This was what Fengwu could not figure out the most. Who are you talking to? May Irene had just breathed a sigh of relief when she saw Fengwu staring at the empty street and talking to herself. It was a little scary. Chapter 407. Xiaowu. Mingxi held Fengwu's hand and looked ahead worriedly. There are so many people here, so many identical people. Fengwu turned back and said seriously to Mingxi. While Fengwu and Mingxi were talking, these identical spiritual bodies all had a ferocious look on their faces. Even the ferocious look on their faces was exactly the same. These strange spirits had no intention of answering Fengwu's question and disappeared in the blink of an eye. You're saying there are evil spirits here? Under the crimson moon, it was simply too normal to breed evil spirits. This was also why Mingxi made such a guess. No, they're not evil spirits. They have nothing on them. Fengwu shook her head and denied Mingxi's guess. They're not evil spirits. Mingxi wanted to ask Fengwu what exactly those things were. But the place they were in now was a bit dangerous. It really wasn't a good place to ask. You're saying there are undead moving around here. Could it be that this is actually a ghost town? Ghost town, this name is really appropriate, Bao Bao thought. Eve, who was speaking, was shocked by her own guess and broke out in a cold sweat. People were afraid of the unknown. Undead were exactly what ordinary people were afraid of. Apart from necromancers, no one would particularly want to see spirits. Little girl, you're a necromancer. The middle-aged man who escaped first looked at Fengwu with shining eyes. In their group, there were pharmacists, mages, and swordmasters, but there was no necromancer. The middle-aged man thought about how he felt that he was being watched as soon as he entered the city. He didn't doubt that Fengwu had revealed the information. It turned out that they were being watched by a group of undead. No wonder every time they came in, they felt strange all over. No, I can just see some things. Fengwu didn't lie. Although she had the qualifications to become a necromancer, she never thought of becoming one. She preferred swords. It's good that you can see. It's good that you can see. Can you tell us what you saw just now? The middle-aged man asked sincerely. Fengwu didn't feel that there was anything to hide, so she told them what she saw just now. At this time, beside Fengwu and behind the spirit of the emperor, the spirits began to gossip about what they had just discovered. It seems that the legend is true. I didn't expect the Tsar to be such a cruel person. That's why people say you can't judge a book by its cover. Tsar looks like a dog, but his actions are basically inhumane. For the sake of one person, everyone is implicated. This is too much. The Tsar is famous for being a pervert. He would do something like this. This is really something that he would do. These spirits started gossiping about the Tsar. What's going on? Do you know something? When Bao Bao flew over from Fengwu's side, he happened to hear these spirits talking. He went over curiously. These spirits didn't hide anything and immediately told Bao Bao everything about the Tsar. Bao Bao pouted after hearing that. He didn't approve or disapprove of the Tsar's character. I originally thought that the books were just stories made up by others. I didn't expect it to be true. Mingxi took a deep breath and said, Do you know something about Mingxi? Juanza also looked at Mingxi. Other than Juanza, everyone also looked in Mingxi's direction, hoping that he could explain. Mingxi coughed lightly. If I didn't guess wrongly, those spirits that Xiaowu saw should be citizens of the Sand Country, Mingxi said. So the people of the Sand Country all look exactly the same? This was too unbelievable. In a world, it wasn't easy to find two people who had the same height, weight, and disposition. Moreover, everyone in the Sand Country looked the same, had the same expression, the same actions, and the same disposition. If they were told that they were born this way, No matter what, they wouldn't believe it. Of course that's impossible. The reason why they turned out this way was because of a legend. Mingxi then shared some of the things he knew. 10,000 years ago, before the Sand Country was unified, most of the people living in this desert were ordinary humans. Bandits ran rampant in the desert, and the people living in the desert were often in dire straits. One day, a person from the demon realm came to this desert for some reason. That person from the demon realm was just a small soldier in the demon realm, but he was an existence that these people couldn't surpass. His arrival made the lives of the people here even harder. Not only did the demon realm request these people to offer good wine as a tribute, but they also wanted to offer beauties. Therefore, the people back then had no choice but to offer up the food that they didn't have much to begin with as a tribute. They also offered up the most beautiful women in the vicinity. The demon realm was brutal by nature and would kill humans at the drop of a hat. The people were filled with resentment, but they were unable to go against this demon realm. Later on, one of the beauties offered as a tribute got pregnant. After being pregnant for 10 months, this woman's life force was sucked dry by the baby in her womb. She then broke out of her womb and came to this world. Originally, with that demon realm member around, these humans didn't dare to hurt that child. It was a pity that the demon realm member was killed by an expert who passed by one day. That expert only killed the demon realm member and didn't care about that half-human, half-demon child. That child was adopted by the elder brother of the dead woman. That man didn't think that he wanted to take good care of the child as he grew up. You'd be sorely mistaken if you thought that way. The man only wanted to torture this child, making him pay the price for the death of his younger sister, whom he loved dearly. This price should have been paid by that demon realm member. However, since the demon realm member had died, the man naturally wanted to take revenge on the demon realm's descendant. From then on, the man began to abuse that child every day. The child, who didn't know anything, was abused until he was covered in wounds. However, no one was willing to provide help to this child. The people in the vicinity looked at the child as if they were looking at a dirty object, an object that was used for them to take revenge on. The child began to hate everyone. Of course, the person he hated the most was still the man, who he should have called uncle. The boy grew up. He had demon realm blood in his body. After awakening his bloodline, his cultivation improved by leaps and bounds. Finally, the boy defeated the uncle who had adopted him and killed him in an extremely cruel way. As for those who didn't lend him a helping hand, they were cursed by the power of the demon realm and would forever take on the appearance of his uncle. These people would have to face this face every day just like him, and would never be able to regain their original appearance. Later on, the Sand Country was established. The citizens inside all took on the appearance of the Sand Emperor's uncle, and would never be able to change back. Regardless of whether it was a man or a woman, it was the same. The citizens couldn't even commit suicide, and could only be imprisoned in this ancient desert city by the Sand Emperor forever. Chapter 408. Those who were imprisoned became the targets of the Tsar. Every time the Tsar was in a bad mood, he would randomly pick a person who had the same terrifying face as his uncle to vent his anger on. He would torture that person in all sorts of ways. And after he was tortured to death, he would call another person in to continue torturing him until he was completely frustrated. This was the Tsar's favorite game. Regarding this game, the people who supported the Tsar at that time jokingly called it the Tsar's game. After hearing what Mingxi said, everyone had different expressions. For a moment, no one knew what they were thinking. So, the Tsar is actually a half-human, half-demon? Mei Irene said softly. Exactly the same face. This Tsar is indeed a half-demon, half-human. He's a ruthless person. Lu Chen did not have much of an impression of the Tsar. In the past, he did not even know who the Tsar was. However, during these few days, he had learned a lot about the Tsar. As his understanding deepened, he did not have a good impression of the Tsar at all. The people here are also pitiful to have met such a master, Eve said calmly. Could it be that the reason why those people who came in first disappeared was because of them? Caesar could not help but guess. He was a person with a firm mind. No matter how sympathetic the people of the Sand Country were, he would not feel anything special. That's very possible, Juanza agreed. Everyone be careful. The city is filled with the spirits of the dead people of the Sand Country. No one knows what they can do, Chukri said. That's right. Everyone be careful. So it's all because of those spirits of the dead. So many people have disappeared. I wonder if those people have already been killed. The middle-aged man sighed. His expression was that of realization. Knowing that they were surrounded by dead spirits of the dead, everyone felt a little uncomfortable. Their every move was under the eyes of these spirits of the dead. No one would feel comfortable. Let's go in and take a look. If we want to leave this place, we still have to find a way out, Zicheng said. Everyone nodded and agreed with Zicheng's idea. The group walked on the street, but there was no one on the street. The city was dead silent. If they didn't know in advance that there were many undead in the city, no one would have thought that there would be other things here. Xiao Wu, since you can see the undead, can you communicate with them? Maybe they will know where the exit is. Zicheng turned around and looked at Fengwu. Zicheng's words reminded everyone that Fengwu's ability to communicate with the undead was indeed very useful in this place. If used well, it could save them a lot of effort. I'll try. Fengwu didn't refuse and agreed without thinking. She walked in a certain direction and said a few words to the air. In less than 2 minutes, she came back. How is it? What did those people say? Did they promise to take us to find the exit? Fengwu shook her head. They ignored me, and they were very strange. They didn't talk at all. It was also the first time that Fengwu had encountered such undead that she couldn't communicate with at all. Everyone was very disappointed with this answer, but they also knew that they couldn't blame her for this matter. They all expressed their understanding and told her not to take it to heart. The ancient desert city was very big. They walked all the way, but they didn't encounter the kind of people that the middle-aged man said would suddenly disappear. However, everyone didn't dare to be careless. They didn't stay in the houses in the city. Their only goal was the palace. Everyone felt that if there was a way out, then the way out must be in the palace. The palace was the largest and most luxurious building in the city. Fengwu and her party passed through the unguarded gate and directly entered the building that represented the supreme imperial power in the city. The palace was built very large, and the scenery inside was very beautiful. The garden was very beautiful, and the flowers were very rare in the desert. Through the garden they entered the hall. The hall was magnificent, and the walls were inlaid with night pearls for illumination. In the center of the hall was a throne inlaid with gems. Just taking this throne out and selling it was enough for ordinary people to spend for several lifetimes. Although the throne was very attractive, no one touched it or had the idea of moving it away. This place was not a good place. Any small mistake could cause a big crisis. No one was a fool who would touch the throne that symbolized imperial power at this time. Let's split up and see if we can find any clues, Mingxi said. The palace was too big. If so many of them walked together, it would be bad for them to find a way out. It was better to look for it separately. That's good. Let's meet in the hall in half an hour. Caesar nodded in agreement. Out of confidence in his own strength, he was not afraid of the danger that they might encounter if they acted separately. The others did not have any objections. Everyone formed their own teams, and then divided the area that they needed to look for, and then set off to find a way out. Fengwu, of course, was still with Mingxi. Mingxi was not at ease letting Fengwu form a team alone. This girl was too naive. He was afraid that she would be cheated and help others count the money. This man is not bad. Xiaowu's taste is not bad. Mingxi's appearance was still very good for him. Some of the little maids liked this kind of good-looking man very much. The spirits of these maids drooled all the way to Mingxi. Fortunately, Mingxi did not know. Otherwise, who knew how angry he would be? Half an hour later, everyone gathered back. There was no suspected teleportation point in the entire palace. Lu Chun and Feng Li were lucky. They found a notebook in a little maid's room. Some things were recorded in this notebook. Everyone gathered together and listened to Lu Chun read out the things that the little maid had recorded, hoping to find some clues to leave. Today my appearance changed again. My face is becoming more and more like the people here. I don't know how long I can stay awake. Perhaps it won't be long before I become like the others. I will no longer remember who I am and become exactly like the others. More people have entered this city. They will gradually become the same as me. Looking at them desperately trying to escape, it really is like looking at myself when I first came to this place. It's useless. No one can leave this place, not even if they die. Today I heard big news. Our king has been killed. Will this be a relief for us? Without the king's curse, will we be able to return to how we were before? The king is really dead. Everyone will become sacrifices to be buried with him. I don't want to die. I don't want to die. Chapter 409. The diary only reached this far, and it only recorded a few days of information. It could be seen that the person who recorded these things had not been in the palace for a long time, so she could only write down these things. From these words, they could infer one thing, and that was that the people who came to this country would become like the uncle that the other czar hated the most. Not only would their appearance change, but even their thoughts would change. Perhaps when they completely changed into another person, their previous memories would also disappear. This might be no different from death. We only found this, and we don't know where the exit is at all. Eve said, a little discouraged. The others were not in a good mood either. Did anyone look carefully? I remember that many palaces have secret rooms. Perhaps the exit is in the secret room. Zicheng pondered for a moment before saying, I looked very carefully. I almost dug up the floor. I did find a few secret rooms, but there was no exit. Olafman said, because it was related to whether or not they could leave this place. It was impossible for anyone not to search with all their might. Zicheng was not the only one who could think of the secret passage here. Everyone was not stupid. And among this group of people, there were also people from big families who were familiar with secret rooms and secret passages. It was impossible for them to miss it. They could not find it anywhere. Could it be that the exit was not in the palace, but somewhere else? This was not impossible, but if it was not in the palace, then the range was huge. It would take a lot of time to search the whole city. However, this ancient desert city was full of strange things. It was very unwise to stay in such a place for a long time. The worst thing was that they had no other choice. Wait, there is a place we haven't looked yet. Mingxi suddenly said. That's right. There is a place we haven't looked for. Caesar's reaction was not slow. He quickly knew what Mingxi was talking about. The garden. The two of them said the answer in unison. They had searched all the rooms in the palace, including the servants' room and the kitchen, but only the garden had not been searched. Everyone suddenly realized, but it was true. They had not searched the garden yet. Everyone rushed towards the garden. At this time, the spirit of the emperor and the others spoke. Xiao Wu, there is a spirit in the corner up ahead who has been watching you. I just sent someone to contact her. She said that she has something to say to you and wants you to find her alone. The spirit of the emperor stood beside Feng Wu and said. Feng Wu thought about it and agreed. She glanced at the team in front of her, who was rushing to the garden to search. Feng Wu didn't tell Mingxi. She followed the spirit of the emperor and the others to find the spiritual body they were talking about. It was Feng Wu's first time seeing such an incomplete spirit. This face looked very much like the face of the Tsar's legendary uncle, but it was not completely the same. Her facial transformation was obviously only half complete. But because it was only half complete, it made her look very strange. Her face was half yin and half yang, half like a woman and half like a man. Even the color of her hair was half yin and half yang. Her appearance was enough to scare people to death. Feng Wu was not scared. She was just a little surprised. You're here. You can see us, right? I heard them say that there was someone who could see us. I didn't really believe it. I didn't expect you to be able to see us. The strange woman cried like a pear blossom in the rain. The scene that should have looked pitiful was like a scene in a horror movie because of her crying. Don't cry. Feng Wu stared at her seriously. She didn't like people crying in front of her. Master also said that nothing could be solved by crying. Crying was just a way to escape, and the strong would never escape. Feng Wu, who had been determined to become a strong person since she was young, never liked children who cried. Who are you? Why are you completely different from them? Bao Bao curiously flew around her in a circle, his little mouth opening and closing. My name is Xiaoqi. I was originally an ordinary girl. My family has lived in the desert oasis for generations. It wasn't until the Tsar unified the desert and built the ancient desert city that I thought of coming to the ancient desert city to find work. I didn't expect this place to be completely different from what I imagined. Until I died, I didn't get to go out and see my parents again. Xiaoqi thought of the sad part and cried even more sadly. Fengwu was not a person who was good at comforting people. She could only tell her not to cry, but this strange-looking girl seemed to be possessed by the crying god. She would cry easily. Fengwu stared. She liked to cry so much. She must be weak. Why do you look different from the people outside? Baobao was most curious about this. You can see us, so you must know that we all look the same. About the king's curse, do you know? The woman asked carefully. I know a little. Fengwu told her the story she heard from Mingxi. What you know is not everything. There is one thing wrong. The woman shook her head sadly. What's wrong? Baobao asked curiously. It's not us who are cursed. It's this city. Once you enter this city, you will slowly become like that person. The king has trapped all of us here. Before the transformation is complete, no one is allowed to leave. The woman sobbed. You mean anyone who enters this city will become like that person, including Xiao Wu and the others? Baobao's face changed and his eyes widened. The woman nodded timidly. Yes, including you. The only way to change is to kill the person who created this curse, which is our king. You want us to help you kill the Tsar. At this time, White Lotus spoke. It turned into a small snake and climbed onto Fengwu's shoulder. Its vertical eyes stared coldly at the spiritual body of the woman in front of it. Yes, please help us. We have no other choice. If we don't kill the Tsar, all of us will be imprisoned here forever. We won't be able to go anywhere, and we'll only be able to wear this face forever. The woman pleaded softly. TSK, you haven't said why you are different from the others. Don't talk nonsense here. White Lotus glared at her coldly and successfully made her swallow her next cry. The reason why I'm different from them is because I wasn't completely changed when I died. At that time, the king suddenly passed away, and the two most loyal lords by the king's side sealed all of us in the ancient desert city, never to leave. We all became funerary objects and were locked in this place forever. At that time, my transformation was only half complete, so I have always been like this. Chapter 410. Is there no one else like you? Baobao suddenly asked. No, what's wrong? The woman looked at Baobao in confusion. Baobao didn't say anything, but there was a hint of sneer in his drooping eyes. The woman told some of her bad experiences. Because her appearance was different from others, she was rejected by other spirits. She was often bullied here, and her days were very hard. She desperately hoped that someone could save them who had been harmed by the Tsar. The woman was very pitiful. She died miserably when she was alive, and she could not rest in peace after death. Fengwu promised to take her to see the others, so that they could find a way to kill the Tsar and save all the undead. At this time, the people who were constantly looking for a way out of the back garden also found that Fengwu was missing. The first to discover it was, of course, Mingxi. Mingxi never thought that the obedient Fengwu girl would run away by herself. When he found that she was missing, he thought that something had happened to her. He was so anxious that he organized everyone to look for her. He himself was so anxious that he frowned deeply. He rushed into the hall and began to shout Fengwu's name. Xiao Wu, Xiao Wu. Mingxi shouted Fengwu's name loudly. The same was true for other people. The voice of Fengwu could be heard everywhere in the palace. Are you looking for me? Fengwu did not know how worried Mingxi was because she sneaked away without saying a word. Mingxi blamed himself. Because of his negligence, something happened to Fengwu. He would never forgive himself for the rest of his life. As soon as Fengwu made a sound, Mingxi rushed up with a look of surprise, hugged her into his arms, and checked her again and again to make sure that she was all right. Only then did he feel relieved. Where have you been? How can you run around? Mingxi was worried and angry at the same time. This was the first time he spoke to Fengwu in such a serious tone. Fengwu blinked and felt a little wronged, but Mingxi was angry. Fengwu didn't dare to open her mouth to argue. She could only hold his finger pitifully. Seeing her so aggrieved, Mingxi couldn't get angry anymore. Don't do that again, okay? If you need to leave, you must tell me. Mingxi sighed and softened his tone. When Fengwu saw that Mingxi was no longer fierce to her, she was so happy that her eyes curved. She promised very cleverly that she would be obedient in the future. Xiaowu, where did you go just now? Do you know how worried everyone was? Don't run around like that again. Zicheng had already sent Eve to inform everyone that Fengwu had been found. Seeing that the two of them were finally done talking, she finally spoke up with a face full of worry and disapproval. Zicheng was quite surprised at how important Fengwu was in Mingxi's heart. He didn't expect that Mingxi didn't have no feelings for Fengwu. It was just that Mingxi didn't come from an ordinary family. Would his family accept a woman like Fengwu who had given birth before? Although the school's explanation was that Fengwu had mistakenly eaten the pregnancy fruit and had a child, the pregnancy fruit was a rare and precious treasure. However, the pregnant fruit was a precious spiritual fruit that was rarely seen. Moreover, it grew in very few places. How could Fengwu have eaten such a rare spiritual fruit by mistake? She didn't believe it. Fengwu still didn't know that her relationship with Mingxi hadn't even started, but Zicheng had already labeled it as a tragedy. Fengwu didn't have much to say to Zicheng, but she couldn't ignore other people when they talked to her. Ajur had said that this was out of courtesy, but Ajur himself often ignored other people's words. Was this considered rude? Fengwu couldn't figure it out, but she still listened obediently. If someone spoke to her, as long as they didn't have any bad intentions, she would respond, even if it was just one word. So little sister Fengwu is fine. We were so worried. It's good that you're fine. Don't run around in the future. This place is very creepy. So many people in our team disappeared. We all thought that Miss Fengwu had disappeared too. It's great that you're fine now. Those who were looking for Fengwu also came back one by one. The moment they saw Fengwu, they all expressed their concern. Fengwu's answer was very brief. She kept repeating the words, I'm fine. No one said anything about her. When everyone's concern came to an end, they finally had time to ask where Fengwu had gone. In order to let everyone see Xiaoqi, Fengwu used an undead psychic potion from her space ring. When this potion was dripped on one's eyelids, they could see things that the naked eye couldn't normally see. The psychic potion was very effective. They could already see the effect as soon as it was dripped. A creature that was neither male nor female suddenly appeared in front of them. That wasn't all. Next to Fengwu was a black mass of translucent souls. These people were wearing ancient battle robes and armors, or noble costumes. At first glance, they knew that they weren't normal humans. Everyone was so scared that they almost couldn't speak clearly. It was impossible for anyone to not be scared when they suddenly saw such a group of undead. When Fengwu made this decision, Bao Bao and the spirit of the emperor agreed, after thinking for a few minutes. The spirit of the emperor couldn't hide it all the time. Sometimes it was inconvenient for them to communicate with Fengwu, and they had to explain for a long time. It was good that everyone could see it, so there was no need to explain anything. Mingxi looked at Fengwu with some understanding. He had already noticed that Fengwu was in a daze from time to time, and talked to herself. He already had some guesses in his heart. Chapter 4:11. Of course, Fengli was not the only one who had this question. Everyone else was very confused. The Tsar had been dead for many years, and based on what happened to the spirit of the emperor, the Tsar's soul should have been imprisoned to create an endless amount of murderous aura to protect the sea god's tomb. Since the Tsar had already received the punishment he deserved, why did Xiaoqi still want them to kill the Tsar? No matter how they thought about it, it was a very strange thing. Our king has always been alive, living in the desert city, Xiaoqi said with a pale face. You said the Tsar has always been alive? That's impossible. Caesar frowned and shook his head. Yes, everyone knows that the Tsar is dead. Without becoming a god, he can't live for tens of thousands of years. As long as a human did not become a god, their lifespan would eventually come to an end. It was impossible for them to live for tens of thousands of years. Zicheng, the transmigrated female protagonist, still had this bit of common sense. Our king has always been alive, living in the moon. Xiaoqi bit her lip. Although it was a little frightening for her to do this with a face that was neither male nor female, it was a little strange. The moon. Could it be? Mingxi was shocked and suddenly had a guess. The moon you're talking about is. Eve was about to ask more, but Xiaoqi's expression suddenly changed. It's too late, I have to leave here. If I stay any longer, they'll definitely find out. Xiaoqi said hurriedly, and disappeared in a puff of smoke. Everyone called Xiaoqi's name a few times, but no one responded. It seemed that Xiaoqi had really left. What do we do now? Mei Irene asked uneasily. We've been here for a long time. Will we really become the same as Xiaoqi and the others? Eileen touched her face, her fair little face full of panic. What was a woman most afraid of? Losing her beautiful face. Eileen was a beauty who was popular among men. If she had to live with a man's face, she would rather die. It should be true. You'll understand when you look outside. Zicheng pointed outside the hall. Elena turned around to take a look. She almost screamed out loud. Outside the palace, a large group of identical spirits stood outside the palace. Being stared at by so many identical faces at the same time was not a good feeling. Elena and Mei Irene screamed at the top of their lungs. Their screams almost tore the roof off. Even Eve was so scared that she hid behind Zicheng, her body trembling. These are the people from the Sand Country. Zicheng swallowed her saliva. This was also the first time she had seen so many people who looked exactly the same. She felt a little uncomfortable in her heart. Not only did these people have the same appearance, even their auras, movements, and expressions were exactly the same. It wasn't scary if one person was like this, but if a group of people were like this, then it was very scary. It must be them. These people are also pitiful. They were tortured by the Sand Emperor, just because these people did not save him when he was young. Such methods are indeed cruel. Compared to the Sand Emperor, I suddenly feel that I'm not a bad person. The 7 non-mainstream people who had joined halfway clicked their tongues in wonder. What are you talking about? Feng Li rolled her eyes at them. Looks like we have to go to the moon to take a look, Mingxi suddenly said. The moon? Could it be the crimson moon outside? Zicheng guessed. Mingxi nodded calmly, not saying anything. Zicheng did not expect Mingxi to like her too much. After the incident at Bewitching Wind Island, she already knew that she would gradually drift apart from Mingxi and the others from now on. It was impossible for Zicheng not to feel that it was a pity that she missed out on these people's favorability. But she had no way to change her image in Mingxi's eyes. Forget it. Let's just take one step at a time. As long as he was willing to talk to her, she might have a chance to establish a new friendship with Mingxi and the others. I guessed it was there too. Other than that place, there can't be any other place with a moon. Sherrod looked in the direction of the palace and said with a serious expression, Let's go and meet the Sand Emperor on the moon. Caesar clenched the staff in his hand and said without hesitation. Everyone, including the middle-aged man, agreed to go to the moon to find trouble with the Sand Emperor. They couldn't find a way out, and it was very likely that the exit was with the Sand Emperor. When they eliminated the Sand Emperor, the exit might appear naturally. If they wanted to enter the Crimson Moon, they had to leave this place and go out of the ancient desert city. The Crimson Moon would only appear above the pile of bones. They could only reach the moon if they went out of the city. The quiet street was still silent, but when everyone walked the same path this time, the feeling was different because everyone saw the truth. Faces that looked exactly the same were staring at them with cold and emotionless eyes. Their eyes flashed with an unknown light. They did not pounce on them, nor did they stop them from leaving. What did those undead want to do? Although they were puzzled, no one could give them an answer. Those who thought that there would be a tough battle breathed a sigh of relief. The number of undead was really a bit too large, much larger than the group following Fengwu. Among them, only Fengwu had some research on undead, and there wasn't even a proper necromancer. No matter how one looked at it, the success rate of communicating with these spirits was far too low. According to Xiaoqi, once their appearances completely changed, not only would their appearances change, but even their personalities would change as well. Who knew what a group of spirits with twisted personalities would do? While thinking about it, Everyone finally succeeded in walking out of the ancient desert city. When they walked out of the city gate, they saw a pile of bones. There was no scene of skeletons standing up and wielding swords. If they weren't sure that it was impossible for everyone to see, no one would believe that all this was real, and that these skeleton soldiers could come back to life. Everyone walked out of the city and passed through the pile of bones. They wanted to go directly into the crimson moon, but the crimson moon was gone. They didn't see anything at all. How could this be? Where's the moon? Why is the moon gone? Irene may have been frightened more than she had ever been since she was a child. Her spirit was already a little out of control. The disappearance of the moon was the worst news for her. Where's the moon? Where did the moon go? What should we do? What should we do now? Eileen said, a little out of her wits. In the end, what Eileen was most afraid of was going back and waiting, slowly becoming the same as those people inside. Don't panic, I think the moon is not gone. It only appears at a specific time. Don't worry, everyone. Zicheng gently comforted the girls. We can only wait for the red light to appear again. Probably only when the red light appears can we enter the crimson moon. Chapter 412. Mingxi's words made the frightened girls feel a little better. As long as they could enter the moon, it was okay to wait for a while. As long as they couldn't go in and kill the Tsar, the curse was a big deal for them. They didn't want to become a man or a monster that was neither male nor female. Everyone stood at the gate, waiting for the red light to appear again. Fengwu leaned on Mingxi's shoulder and yawned. Her big black eyes were wet. Blinking the water droplets on her eyelashes, Fengwu took out a big chicken leg and ate it. For her, the Tsar was not as important as eating. A large group of spirit bodies followed behind Fengwu. Some were talking, some were studying the bones, and some were circling around Wang Jiling and Fengwu. In the past, they couldn't see them, but now that they couldn't help but feel a little annoyed at this scene. Be careful later. There might be a trap for us in the red moon. Bao Bao flew to Fengwu's ear and whispered. What do you mean? Fengwu asked Bao Bao, puzzled. Are you stupid? Don't you think that Xiaoqi's appearance is very sudden? She kept saying that the Tsar had harmed all of them. But have you ever heard her curse the Tsar? If she really hated the Tsar so much, she wouldn't call him king so easily. It's good enough that she didn't curse him. Fengwu was simple but not stupid. She just didn't use her brain. Now that she followed Bao Bao's train of thought, she easily figured out some things. Then she nodded in agreement and looked at Bao Bao with admiration. Bao Bao was so amazing. Why didn't she think of it? Fengwu's starry eyes made Bao Bao feel better. He pulled Bao Bao down and continued to talk about some of his discoveries. There's one more thing. Didn't you notice that other than Xiaoqi, the other spirits were very strange? They didn't speak. They just surrounded us all the way. When we entered the palace, Xiaoqi appeared in the palace. The other spirits stood outside the palace gate. I realized that it wasn't that they didn't want to come in. It was because the palace was protected by a barrier. They couldn't come in. The other spirits couldn't enter. But why were the spirit of emperors and Xiaoqi able to? If that barrier could only block spirits that have been cursed, then Xiaoqi should also be within its range. Although she was only halfway through her transformation, there was a curse on her body. Logically speaking, she shouldn't have been able to come in. However, not only did she come in, but she was also able to talk to us for half a day. Also, if Xiaoqi really has the ability to enter the palace's barrier at any time, the other spirits shouldn't be able to bully her. After all, the other spirits can't enter the palace, and spirits don't need to eat. If she hides in there, who can bully her? But she said that she is often bullied. This is very unreasonable. The strangest thing is that what she said doesn't match what we saw in the diary. You can think back. In that diary, other than the owner of the diary, there were a few newcomers who entered the ancient desert city. The owner of the diary hadn't completed her transformation yet, not to mention those who came later. If it's really like what she said, that the transformation will stop once she dies, then what about those who came later? They shouldn't have undergone any transformation either. They died without completing their transformation, and they can't transform after death. However, she didn't mention a single word about those people. It was as if they had never appeared. There are so many suspicious points. but they didn't notice any of them. I'm speechless with their intelligence. Bao Bao suddenly felt like he was crushing his opponent in terms of intelligence. How could he solve this? Bao Bao's examples all pointed to the fact that Xiaoqi was a very problematic person. He didn't know if the smarter ones in the group like Ming Shi, Kaiser, Juanzi, Lu Chun, and Ziqing had noticed this. In any case, he was sure that the fool Fengwu wouldn't be able to notice these suspicious points. These bones were all killed by sorcery. You don't have to look at them anymore. The spirit of the emperor saw Ming Shi holding a bone in his hand and examining it with a serious expression. He stepped forward and said calmly, "Sorcery? Do you know how they died?" Ming Shi turned his head. From his eyes, the spirit of the emperor could see the respect this youth had for him. This made the spirit of the emperor feel quite good. The spirit of the emperor was in a good mood and didn't mind telling him more. Everyone's attention was also attracted. They all pricked up their ears, wanting to hear what the spirit of the emperor had to say. Fengwu bit into the drumstick and ate it with relish. She blinked her eyes at the spirit of the emperor. Seeing her eating so happily, the others looked at the pile of bones nearby. How big of a heart did she have to be able to eat in such an environment? Wasn't she disgusted? They felt a little nauseous watching her eat. However, now wasn't the time to think about this. Everyone just glanced at the drumstick in Fengwu's hand and shifted their attention away. They began to listen attentively to the spirit of the emperor. They died from the blood sacrifice reincarnation technique. Blood sacrifice reincarnation technique? What's that? Everyone looked at each other. This name didn't sound like anything. Although everyone had some guesses in their hearts, they were still worried about whether their guesses were correct. The spirit of the emperor was too lazy to keep them in suspense. He directly told them, the so-called blood sacrifice reincarnation technique was a forbidden sorcery in our era. The person who performed this technique would absorb the blood of thousands of living creatures. From this blood, he would be able to obtain a chance to be reborn. However, those whose blood was sucked dry would have their souls scattered. They wouldn't even have a chance to be reborn. It was an extremely cruel sorcery. After absorbing the life essence, the person who performed the technique would have a chance to seize another person's body. Once the spiritual sea of the person with weak spiritual power was invaded, the person would be swallowed by the spiritual power of the person who performed the technique, and the person's body would be completely taken over. You should be extremely careful when you enter the Crimson Moon this time. That guy sealed himself and waited for 10,000 years, waiting for an outstanding person to take over. If he succeeds, I don't need to say what will happen to the person who was taken over. So the Tsar really isn't dead? Lu Chun asked uncertainly. In a sense, you can say that he's dead, but you can also say that he's still alive. What does that mean? Lu Chun asked. Once he uses this kind of heaven-defying sorcery, he'll at most be a walking corpse before he can take over. He won't have a heartbeat or breath. He won't even be able to leave the Crimson Moon. Once he leaves the place where he sealed himself, his body and spiritual power will rapidly decline. At that time, you probably won't need to kill him. His soul will scatter. Chapter 413. The words of the emperor's spirit undoubtedly caused a layer of haze to appear in the hearts of everyone present. If they wanted to defeat the Tsar, they would face the danger of being possessed. If they did not go, then with the passage of time, there was a high possibility that they would end up like the spirits inside, becoming someone else's appearance, losing their own thoughts and consciousness, and staying in the ancient desert city forever. Whether it was being possessed or becoming someone else's appearance, it was not an outcome they wanted to see. It doesn't matter. Who cares if he will be possessed or not? We can still get out if we fight. If we don't go, we might as well die. Unexpectedly, the 7 non-mainstream people were the first to understand. Although the 7 of them were dressed a little strangely, and their thoughts were a little simple, these single-celled organisms were the first to understand at a time like this. Everyone felt as if they had been hit in the head. Yes, they had no way out. Even if they did not go, they might die. What else was there to consider? Regardless of whether they would be possessed or not, they would still have a chance of survival if they went. After thinking it through, time didn't feel so bad anymore. After an unknown amount of time, the red light in the sky reappeared. A faint red moon appeared right above the white bones, and these white bones were awakening. Everyone exchanged glances and flew toward the red moon together. At this moment in the red moon, a rather handsome young man was sitting quietly on the throne. He seemed to have sensed something, and the corners of his mouth curled up into a cold smile. Is it here? It has been 10,000 years, and this opportunity has finally come. This man was the target that Ming-Shi and the others wanted to eliminate, the king of the Sand Country, the Tsar. Entering the Crimson Moon was unexpectedly smooth. Because it was too smooth, it made people feel uneasy. When everyone stepped onto the Crimson Moon, the scene they saw shocked everyone. It was actually an ancient desert city, which was exactly the same as the city below. The city was exactly the same, and the streets were exactly the same. Even the location and appearance of the palace were exactly the same. The Tsar must be in the palace. This answer appeared in everyone's heart. Everyone held their weapons tightly. The opponent they were about to face was a peerless expert from 10,000 years ago. If they didn't win this battle, then all of them would die here. Ming-Shi and the others walked step by step towards the palace in the center of the ancient desert city. When they reached the palace gate slowly opened by itself. Ha 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 ha. After 10,000 years, someone has finally come. This king can finally see the light of day again. When Ming-Shi and the others walked into the hall, they were greeted by the Tsar's excited laughter. The Sand Emperor had been waiting for this opportunity for 10,000 years. Back then, if it wasn't because the sea god had dragged his sand country into the divine mausoleum, he would have found a new body and been reborn perfectly. He didn't need to seal himself in this crimson moon and absorb the baleful aura to nourish his soul and spiritual power in order to preserve his soul and spiritual power. Fengwu frowned as she looked at the dense baleful aura around her. It turned out that the reason why she couldn't find any baleful aura outside was because all the baleful aura was concentrated in one place. That was why she couldn't see any other places. Sand Emperor Dai. Zicheng held the magic staff in his hand and looked at the Sand Emperor with a serious face. You want to kill this king with just the likes of you? Little things who overestimate themselves. The Sand Emperor sneered and looked at Zicheng and the others with disdain. He was the ancient Sand Emperor, who was half human and half demon. His strength was so strong that he was half a step away from having the power of a real demon. Of course, it was impossible for him to put Fengwu and the others in his eyes. Everyone, let's attack together. Caesar shouted and took the lead to attack with his magic staff. Zicheng followed closely behind, and a great battle broke out just like that. At this time, outside the hall, the spirit of the emperor and the other undead didn't follow Fengwu. They quietly looked at the big battle in the hall with a serious expression. But there was also an incomprehensible look on their faces. Your Highness, are we really not going to go in and help Xiao Wu and the others? A spiritual body, wearing a general's armor, stood respectfully beside the spirit of the emperor. We have more important things to do. The spirit of the emperor took a deep breath, and his eyes darkened. What is it? The other spiritual bodies were also very curious. They all looked at their omnipotent king and asked for an answer. Find something and destroy it. What is it? The blood sacrifice reincarnation technique. The blood sacrifice reincarnation technique. Shouldn't that thing be with the Sand Emperor? The spiritual bodies asked in confusion. No, it's somewhere else. Fengwu didn't know about these conversations, but she knew what the spirit of the emperor wanted to do. The spirit of the emperor was worried that if the blood sacrifice reincarnation technique was remembered by the people present and spread it, then the consequences would be unimaginable. In order to prevent this evil technique from appearing in the world again, the spirit of the emperor decided to find this blood sacrifice reincarnation technique and then destroy it. Except for Fengwu, the others didn't know what the spirit of the emperor wanted to do. They were not in the mood to think about the blood sacrifice reincarnation technique now. Everyone's spirit was highly concentrated. They were bent on killing the Sand Emperor and leaving this so-called Sand Country. The Sand Emperor was worthy of being a peerless expert 10,000 years ago. Everyone together couldn't do anything to him. He and Ming-Shi and the others obviously didn't use their full strength. It was as if they were playing with children. The gap in strength made people feel desperate. It was hard to imagine how strong the experts from 10,000 years ago were. The long sword in Ming-Shi's hand emitted a dazzling golden light, and a golden sword light attacked the Sand Emperor. The Sand Emperor's expression didn't change. He didn't even leave his throne. With a gentle wave of his hand, he dealt with Ming-Shi's attack. Boy, you are the strongest among all of us. The bloodline in your body seems to be very good. Your body is mine. The Sand Emperor looked at Ming-Shi, as if he was admiring a peerless treasure. No matter how he looked at it, it was so perfect that he wanted to monopolize it. No one knew that the Sand Emperor had actually chosen Ming-Shi from 4 candidates. These 4 candidates were Ming-Shi, Fengwu, Zicheng and Kaiser. The 4 of them were undoubtedly the most talented among all of them. Ming-Shi's appearance and talent, as well as his extraordinary bloodline, made the Sand Emperor very satisfied. Fengwu's physique was pure and flawless. Her body had a natural aura that made people feel very comfortable. The Sand Emperor could see that Fengwu had the talent to become a nature magician. A nature magician could control all things in nature. This kind of physique and talent was rare, even in ancient times. In ancient times, every time a nature magician was born, they would definitely be worshipped by their country or tribe. They would also be directly designated as the saintess or son of a country. From this, one could see the status of a nature magician. Chapter 414. In ancient times, every time a nature mage was born, they would definitely be worshipped by their own country or tribe, or directly designated as a country's holy maiden or holy son. From this, one could see the status of a nature mage. As for Zicheng and Caesar, both of them were extremely talented people. However, what the Tsar liked about them was not their talent, but their luck. These 2 people were shrouded in great luck. They were the children of luck of this era. The children of luck were born with a mission. Some of them were born to save the world, and some were born to destroy the world. Whether the 2 of them were born to save the world, or to destroy the world, the children of luck were protected by the world's luck. They may encounter dangers, but before their mission was completed, no one could kill them. If they touched the 2 of them, they would be cursed by the world's consciousness. The curse of the world's consciousness was not something the Tsar could resist. Because of this, Zicheng and Caesar were lucky enough to be removed from the Tsar's list of candidates. The remaining 2 candidates were Fengwu and Ming-Shi. Fengwu's talent as a nature mage moved the Tsar, but she was a woman, so the Tsar could only reluctantly give up on her and choose Ming-Shi as the target for possession. As a result, Ming-Shi managed to emerge victorious from the 4 selections. His luck was truly intoxicating. A red chain flew out from the Tsar's hand, but in the blink of an eye, Ming-Shi was bound by this red chain, and he couldn't use any ability. Because the Tsar's movement was too fast, Ming-Shi didn't even have time to escape, and he was already in danger. Senior Ming-Shi, Zicheng was shocked, and immediately attacked the chain with metal magic, trying to cut it open. Unfortunately, the magic had no effect at all. Ming-Shi was still bound in place. Fengwu frowned worriedly. She called in her heart, and Xiaoqun flew out from Fengwu's body, and in the blink of an eye, flew towards Ming-Shi. With a slash of the sword, the originally motionless red chain became thinner. The evil aura on the chain decreased by more than half. Lu Chun and the others were stunned. They didn't expect Fengwu to have such strength. Everyone saw Zicheng's strength just now, but they didn't expect Fengwu's strength to be much stronger than Zicheng's. Otherwise, it would be impossible for the chain to change. As soon as the pure sword appeared, the Tsar immediately felt a kind of panic, as if a natural enemy had appeared, making him want to escape immediately. The Tsar was the Tsar. He quickly calmed down, and his eyes flashed as he looked at the pure sword, and suddenly turned into a stream of light, and rushed into Ming-Shi's sea of consciousness. Ah! Everyone was shocked. They could tell that the Tsar had chosen Ming-Shi to possess his body. No, everyone, quickly kill him. If the Tsar succeeds, we will all die. Among the last few people to join in, someone shouted. The middle-aged man, who was obviously the leader of the group, also looked uncertain. He wasn't sure if he should take advantage of this moment to kill Mingxi and kill the Tsar. Everyone do it! Without waiting for the middle-aged man to make a decision, the other people with him had already started to attack. They raised their weapons and used their sword qi and magic to attack Mingxi. At this time, whether it was Zicheng, Fengwu, or the 7 non-mainstream people, their reaction was very consistent. They surrounded Mingxi to protect him, not letting the middle-aged man and the others hurt Mingxi. Their attacks were all blocked. At this time, Mingxi's face began to turn green and white. At a glance, they knew that he was fighting for his body. Get out of the way. Let's kill the Tsar together while he's trying to possess the Tsar's body. This way, the Tsar will be eliminated immediately, and everyone will be able to go out. Why not? A young man said eagerly. He didn't understand why they didn't let him do the good thing. As long as he died, everyone would be able to survive. Obviously, the people who attacked with the young man had the same idea. Everyone stared at Fengwu and the others with dissatisfaction. They felt that they wanted to drag all of them to death for one person. Since you don't get out of the way, don't blame us for not showing mercy. The middle-aged man seemed to have made up his mind. When he looked at Mingxi, there was a trace of reluctance on his face, but soon his face became firm. He wanted to leave here. He must go out alive. No one can stop him. How could this group of people understand the despair they felt when they saw the people around them disappear day by day? And they couldn't find the reason. They didn't understand anything. No. Fengwu pursed her lips and looked at them seriously. We won't get out of the way. You can't hurt Mingxi. Zicheng looked at the middle-aged man and the group of people with a righteous expression and said firmly, What's wrong with you guys? Mingxi can definitely survive. You can't hurt him. Mei Irene and Eileen also stood in front of Mingxi with firm faces. The two of them had a good impression of Mingxi. Of course, they didn't want anyone to hurt Mingxi. While the two sides were in a stalemate, Mingxi's spirit qi was in a great battle. The Tsar's consciousness was extremely powerful, chasing Mingxi to the point where he could only dodge. He had no power to fight back. The Tsar's consciousness had existed for tens of thousands of years, and for 10,000 years, his spirit and consciousness had been nourished by an endless amount of evil spirit. This evil spirit had allowed his spirit and consciousness to grow to a terrifying level. It was not something that a young man like Mingxi, who was born less than 20 years old, could compare to. Boy, there's no need to run. It's useless. Just obediently merge with this king. And in the future, you and this king will have eternal life together. Isn't that good? The Tsar's cold and proud voice sounded in Mingxi's ears. Mingxi continued to run in his spirit qi without looking back. His face was ashen. This was the first time in his life that he had been in such a difficult situation. Sure enough, the Tsar was an old monster who had lived for tens of thousands of years. He was too strong. I will never let you devour me. Mingxi's voice was not afraid. Although he was running in front, there was no trace of embarrassment or despair in his voice. That's not up to you. The Tsar smiled confidently, his speed suddenly doubled, and he rushed in front of Mingxi. Come, merge with this king in the future. You will be me, and I will be you. We will have eternal life together. The Tsar's voice was full of endless temptation and magic. At this time, Mingxi had nowhere to run. He could only watch as the Tsar pounced on him. Fengwu blocked the sword in the middle-aged man's hand. The middle-aged man was shocked. Although he knew that Fengwu's strength was not weak, he never thought that she would be so powerful that he, a half-step sword great master, could not gain any advantage in front of her. If word of this spread out, perhaps no one would believe it. Chapter 4:15. Fengwu blocked the sword in the middle-aged man's hand. The middle-aged man was shocked. Although he knew that Fengwu's strength was not weak, he never thought that she would be so powerful. He, a half-step sword grandmaster, was actually unable to gain any advantage in her hands. If word of this spread out, no one would dare to believe it. Get out of the way. When the Sand Empress succeeds, all of us will die. The middle-aged man said angrily. He felt that Mingxi's aura was becoming more and more chaotic. He was afraid that the Sand Empress had already begun to take over his body. If the Sand Empress succeeded in taking over his body, Would they still have a chance to live? No, Senior Mingxi will be fine. The Sand Empress won't be able to take over his body. Fengwu was very confident in Mingxi. Unfortunately, no one else had this confidence. Even Zicheng did not dare to say that he believed that Mingxi would be able to get through this. Zicheng would protect Mingxi because everyone knew that the two of them were students of the same school. And Mingxi was her senior. She had to protect him. If she did not protect Mingxi today, her popularity would definitely be affected when she returned to school. Without her popularity, how could she increase her favorability? Therefore, she had to stand on Mingxi's side. Her image could not be destroyed. At the very least, she could not take the initiative to make a move before she was sure that Mingxi had really been taken over. As for Caesar, it was completely because Mingxi and Zicheng were students of the same school. Moreover, he was Zicheng's senior. There was no other reason why he protected her. Fengwu did not care why others protected Mingxi. Right now, she only wanted to protect Mingxi and not let anyone hurt him. This middle-aged man wanted to hurt Mingxi, so how could Fengwu retreat? You are being too soft-hearted. Once the Tsar succeeds in seizing the body, I think you will have nowhere to cry. The middle-aged man was so angry that he almost exploded. This lady wouldn't listen to anything he said to her. She kept saying that Senior Mingxi would be fine, and that no one could possess Senior Mingxi. He really didn't know where she got her confidence from. The other party is the Tsar who has lived for 10,000 years. Do you think he is just a passerby on the street? Senior Mingxi will be fine. This sentence again. The middle-aged man felt that he was already speechless. If it wasn't for the fact that he couldn't take down Fengwu, he would have already rushed over and finished off Mingxi with his sword. The middle-aged man wanted to rush over, but there were only a few people on their side. Most of them chose to protect the beautiful young man named Mingxi. The few of them couldn't fight their way through, so they could only watch helplessly. Because there were only a few people, the middle-aged man had to fight and reason at the same time. He hoped that Fengwu and the others could turn back as soon as possible. Unfortunately, this lady was determined to protect Mingxi. The middle-aged man's saliva was almost dry, but it was useless. After a few more moves, Mingxi, who was in the middle of the crowd, suddenly opened his eyes. When his eyes opened, a golden light flashed, looking beautiful and strange. Lu Chen wanted to pull Fengwu away. At this time, he didn't know whether Mingxi had been possessed by the Tsar or not. Fengwu looked a little silly. He didn't want Fengwu to be careless and die in the hands of the Tsar. Unfortunately, Fengwu didn't understand Lu Chen's good intentions. She shook off Lu Chen's hand that was pulling her sleeve, and then rushed forward into Mingxi's arms. Senior Mingxi. Fengwu hugged Mingxi tightly. Just now, she was worried sick, and her heart was in a mess. The moment Mingxi woke up, her heart finally settled down. I told you he would be fine. Baby's voice suddenly came into Fengwu's ears. She knew that Baby was communicating with her mind. Fengwu didn't have time to care about Baby now. All her attention was attracted by Mingxi. I made you worry. I'm fine. Mingxi touched Fengwu's little head and said gently, Are you really Mingxi? The middle-aged man raised his long sword and asked without relaxing. The others were not sure if he was really Mingxi, and they all stepped back at least 3 meters. There was a strange vacuum around Mingxi. Mingxi smiled helplessly. I'm really Mingxi. I haven't been possessed. How is that possible? The Tsar clearly entered your spirit sea. Do you think we will believe that he didn't possess you? The young man said with a look of disbelief. It wasn't just the middle-aged man, and the others who couldn't believe it. Even the people who chose to protect Ming, she couldn't believe that he could escape from the Tsar. Who was the Tsar? He was the strongest person, who unified the desert 10,000 years ago. They didn't even dare to think about how strong the spiritual power of such a person was. How could he possibly fail to possess someone? The answer was of course impossible. So when Mingxi said that he hadn't been possessed, everyone was doubtful. Instead of believing that Mingxi hadn't been possessed by the Tsar, they would rather believe that Mingxi had been possessed. Now this was the Tsar. Maybe because the Tsar had just succeeded in possessing Mingxi, his strength had been greatly reduced, so he wanted to pretend to be Mingxi to escape a fierce battle. Yes, that must be it. Mingxi still didn't know what everyone was thinking, otherwise, he would definitely be dumbfounded. He was almost possessed, but the Tsar missed one point. He was not an ordinary human being, and there was divine blood flowing in his body. With the protection of divine blood, how could he be successfully possessed by a half-human, half-demon? In order not to let the Tsar discover the abnormality in his spirit sea, he had been pretending to escape, so that the Tsar could possess him. As long as he possessed the Tsar, the protective power in his blood would be activated, and the Tsar's consciousness would be torn apart in an instant. Ever since the Tsar entered Mingxi's spirit sea, Mingxi had been scheming against the Tsar. The Tsar was destroyed by Mingxi's bloodline power in the end, and the Tsar's power in his spirit sea was absorbed by Mingxi. Mingxi's strength had now reached a new level. When he completely absorbed the Tsar's power, he would be even stronger than now, but no one knew how much stronger he would be. Mingxi's divine blood could never be told to outsiders. Only Fengwu knew about it. Even Fengwu knew about it because Baobao saw that Fengwu was worried, so he told her. Mingxi didn't say it himself. My spirit sea is a bit special, so the Tsar couldn't possess me, Mingxi said. Do you think I'll believe you? The young man still didn't believe it. Zicheng also had some hesitation in her heart. It wasn't until she asked the system, and learned that Mingxi was indeed not possessed, that she was relieved. In addition to collecting favorability points to exchange for things, the system rarely helped her. If she wanted to know something, she had to use favorability points to exchange for it. It was really rare for the system to tell her the answer so readily like this time. Chapter 416. Everyone looked at Mingxi doubtfully. They were not sure if the person standing in front of them was Mingxi himself, or the Tsar who had successfully taken over his body. Fortunately, at this moment, the spirit of the emperor appeared. The spirit of the emperor proved that Mingxi had not been taken over. Only then did Zicheng and the others heave a sigh of relief. Speaking of which, since the Tsar is already dead, does that mean that the curse has also disappeared? Luqian asked after thinking for a while. The curse was placed by the Tsar. Now that the Tsar is dead, the curse has naturally disappeared, the spirit of the emperor said with certainty. The spirit of the emperor also sighed at the Tsar's death. Originally, his purpose of following Fengwu was to rescue the souls of the other emperors who were trapped. He did not expect that the ending would turn out like this. How could he not sigh? In the ancient desert city under the crimson moon, the moment the Tsar's consciousness disappeared, all the spirits seemed to hear the sound of the shackles being removed. The spirits who looked exactly the same began to change. They finally returned to their original appearances. All of them were so excited that they could not stop crying. We've changed back. We've finally changed back. The Tsar is finally dead. We're free. We've waited for this day for so long. We've waited for this day for so long. Ah. Boo-hoo. These spirits were so excited that they cried and howled. They felt unprecedentedly relaxed. The curse that had been entangling them all this time had disappeared at this moment. All of their souls had been reborn. The spirits bowed to Fengwu and the others on the crimson moon to express their gratitude. Then, all of them turned into streams of light and disappeared from this world. The curse that had been troubling them had disappeared. They could now reincarnate. No one wanted to stay in this ancient desert city that had brought them endless painful memories. The thing that had been binding their souls all this time was not the sea god, but the Tsar's consciousness. The various methods that the sea god had used against the Tsar had already been resolved by the Tsar. Therefore, as long as the curse was removed, these people of the Sand Country could leave. There was nothing that could bind them anymore. Among these spirits, the girl called Xiaoqi had also returned to her original appearance. If the middle-aged man and the others were here, they would definitely realize that Xiaoqi was actually one of the people who had gone missing at the beginning of their group. Other than Xiaoqi, the other missing people were also in this place. They had all changed their original appearances. Let's go too. We'll leave this place and reincarnate. There was a young man standing next to Xiaoqi. Like Xiaoqi, this man was with the middle-aged man. I wonder how they are doing, Xiaoqi muttered to herself. They were the first to arrive at the ancient desert city, but they were unlucky and died at the hands of these spirits. They didn't even know how they died. They only knew that they were already dead when they opened their eyes. The world they saw after death was completely different from when they were alive. They had the same soul and the same face. The death world of the dead was so scary, but the scariest thing was yet to come. Xiaoqi was chosen by the Tsar, and he asked her to find a way to lure Mingxi and the others into the Crimson Moon. The Tsar had promised them that if she could do it, he would let them go and restore their original faces. They had been turned into monsters by the Tsar and were on the verge of a mental breakdown. The Tsar's promise seemed to be their only life-saving straw. Although Xiaoqi felt sorry for Mingxi and the others, she still did it. When Mingxi and the others entered the Crimson Moon, she regretted it, but it was already too late. The Crimson Moon was not a place where ordinary undead could go. She couldn't stop them at all. She could only watch them fall into the Tsar's trap. Fortunately, nothing happened to everyone in the end, so the guilt in her heart lessened a little. They'll be fine. An old man sighed. The old man was also one of the adventurers who entered the tomb of the god of sin this time. When he came in, he was ready to never get out. He didn't expect that in the end, he would die here. The only thing to be thankful for now was that they didn't have to be the Tsar's slaves and be sealed in this place forever. To be able to get a chance to reincarnate was already a very good result for them. Everyone looked at the Crimson Moon with complicated eyes. Finally, they turned into a ray of light and flew into the sky. Fengwu and the others didn't know any of this. Because the Tsar was dead, the palace had become ownerless. The middle-aged man and the others began to rummage through the palace for useful treasures. Although they found some good magic tools, the real valuable things had already been put away by the spirit of the emperor. The most valuable thing in the entire palace was the blood sacrifice reincarnation technique. Zicheng was very interested in this evil technique. She didn't want to practice this evil technique herself, but wanted to sell it to the system store in exchange for points. This kind of rare technique could be exchanged for considerable points. Naturally, she didn't want to let it go. It was a pity that they couldn't find the blood sacrifice reincarnation technique in the entire palace. Zicheng suspected that the blood sacrifice reincarnation technique might not have been recorded, but it had always been in the Tsar's mind. Since Mingxi had defeated the Tsar's consciousness, it meant that the blood sacrifice reincarnation technique had already fallen into Mingxi's hands. Zicheng was a little disappointed. Since it had fallen into Mingxi's hands, it was impossible for her to get it. Even if she asked Mingxi about this evil technique, he wouldn't tell her. Fengwu took advantage of the time when everyone went to search for treasures in the palace to let Xiaoqun purify the evil aura in the Crimson Moon. When Xiaoqun heard that there was something to eat, he immediately flew out to purify the evil aura. The moment Xiaoqun started to purify, the buildings in the Crimson Moon started to collapse. The ground seemed to have been cut open and split into pieces. At this moment, a black teleportation point appeared in front of everyone. Everyone immediately flew into the teleportation point. Xiaoqun returned to Fengwu's dantian. Mingxi held Fengwu's hand, and the two of them jumped into the teleportation point together. Following the disappearance of the Crimson Moon, the entire Sand Country was forever sealed. Time passed day by day. In the blink of an eye, Mingxi and the others had been in the sea god's tomb for more than 10 days. In these 10 days, no one had returned. Ajur, Riot, and Mo Gui obediently stayed on the ship. Every day, they would either play with Xiaoyi or sit at the back of the ship to fish. Life was monotonous, but they couldn't leave. It couldn't be more miserable. There were many people who were just like them. Many ships in the nearby sea were waiting for their people to return. What Ajur didn't expect was that before Mingxi and the others arrived, Mildy, O'Brien, and Feng Yinran had already arrived. In order to save O'Brien, Mildy had left by herself on a ship. She didn't care about the trouble she would cause Mingxi and the others. Chapter 417. Mildy's luck was not bad. She drove the boat to look for her fiancé, and finally found O'Brien, who was washed to the deserted island by the current a few days ago. After spending some time with Feng Yinran, O'Brien had completely fallen in love with Feng Yinran, this kind and weak girl. The two of them were lucky. On the deserted island, they actually found the old residence of an ancient magician. In that place, the two of them obtained a lot of precious magic books and magic weapons that did not exist in this era. O'Brien gave most of the good things to Feng Yanran, but he only kept the part that he needed. When Mildy found them, the two of them naturally did not say anything, and Mildy also did not know that her fiancé was hiding these things from her. O'Brien was not moved at all by Mildy's behavior of coming to him. His heart was now completely occupied by Feng Yanran. How could he be moved by a fiancé that he did not have the slightest good impression of? After Mildy found O'Brien, she sensitively noticed that he did not want Feng Yanran. Mildy regarded O'Brien as the whole meaning of life, and her attitude toward Feng Yanran, who took away O'Brien's heart, became worse. When the three of them appeared in front of a juror, the relationship between the three of them was already like fire and water. Can you two stop quarreling? It's so late at night, and you don't want others to sleep. Ajur hugged Little Bun, who had been yawning all the time, and his whole person was crazy. Since the three of them came back, he could hear the sound of quarreling almost every day, and it was simply annoying. If it were not for the fact that they were all students of the same school, and now they were in the same team, he would have already thrown a fireball and directly burned that annoying guy to ashes. Woo. I'm sorry, Ajur, I'm sorry, woo-woo. Feng Yanran's eyes were red, and she cried delicately. She really felt that she was wronged. She never had any thoughts about O'Brien. O'Brien was very outstanding, but not enough for her to like him. O'Brien always showed good intentions to her, but she always vaguely rejected him. She did not expect that Mildy would always find trouble with her. Feng Yanran really felt wronged. She didn't do anything wrong. Why was she treated like this? Feng Yanran, who grew up being spoiled like a little princess wherever she went, could not adapt to this kind of life, where people made things difficult for her everywhere. The more she thought about it, the more wronged she felt. Don't cry, can you two please stop? Ever since the three of you came back, we haven't even had a good night's sleep. Just what do you want? Mo Gui walked out with a robe draped over his shoulders and grabbed his hair. Sigh. Riot sighed. He felt powerless in the face of such a noisy situation. Mildy, if you have anything to do with me, why do you have to find trouble with Yanran? Yanran is so kind. How can you bear to hurt her like this? You are indeed a vicious woman. When I go back this time, I will definitely report to my family and annul the engagement with you. O'Brien looked at Feng Yanran with a distressed expression. He couldn't stand the woman. He loved being repeatedly troubled by a woman like Mildy in front of him. When he went back this time, he would annul the engagement with Mildy, and then be with Yanran. Feng Yanran stood at the side and cried. The more she thought about it, the more wrong she felt. Annul the engagement with me? Do you think that's possible? This engagement was decided by our two families. It's not something you can annul just because you want to. Do you want to give up the position of the family's heir for her? Mildy smiled coldly. She felt a chill in her heart. Since the two of them got engaged, she had done her best to help him get more power in the family and let him have his current position in the family. It could be said that if it wasn't for the engagement with her, no matter how talented O'Brien was, he was doomed to be buried. Their family would not have been able to get to where they were today with the help of her family's power. She didn't expect that for a woman, he would ignore all that she had done for him and even say that he wanted to annul the engagement. What kind of person did he think she was? Want to annul the engagement? Dream on. She, Mildy, was not the kind of woman who could be easily dismissed by him. I'll give up. For Yanran, what can't I let go? O'Brien looked like a saint and said that he was willing to give up everything for Feng Yanran without any hesitation. He was willing to do this for Feng Yanran. Mildy's face turned pale. She didn't expect that this man would be so heartless to her. Go back to your rooms and sleep. You can't say anything in vain. If you dare to be so noisy again, believe it or not, I will throw you off the ship. Ajur didn't have the time to listen to the love and hate between the three of them. He just wanted to sleep now. Even Xiao Ye's little head was nodding, and he looked sleepy. After warning the three of them, Ajur took the little bun back to his room to rest. Mildy and the other two didn't make any more noise. Ajur and the others finally had a good sleep. After a good night's sleep, Ajur climbed out of bed energetically. After freshening up, he took Xiaoyi out to make breakfast. But he didn't expect to hear a terrified scream before he even entered the cabin for breakfast. What now? Ajur felt impatient, but he still grabbed the small bag and snatched it away. Who would have thought that when he walked to the deck, he would see Milty lying in a pool of blood while O'Brien was holding a magic staff. There were still remnants of energy waves coming from the magic staff. It was obvious what had happened. Heavens! Will you die if you don't cause trouble? Emogwei and Riot also rushed over at this time. When they saw this scene, Emogwei couldn't help but curse their ancestors in his heart. After a round of emergency treatment, they finally managed to save Mildy. However, due to her severe injuries, she had been unconscious ever since. O'Brien also knew that he had gotten into big trouble this time. His face was very pale, but he still firmly guarded Feng Yanran, who was crying until she was about to die. He didn't leave her side. If there's anything, come at me. Don't hurt Yanran. O'Brien looked at Ajur and the others with a tense expression, as if they were some unreasonable bad guys who bullied his sweetheart. Ajur really wanted to split open this guy's head to see if there was grass growing in it. He handed the little bun to Little White, and let Little White carry him to eat breakfast. Ajur himself, Emogwei, and Riot asked about what had happened. O'Brien didn't say anything. He just took the blame, and kept saying that it had nothing to do with Feng Yanran. In the end, it was Feng Yanran who explained the matter in tears. Only then did they know what had happened. Chapter 418. In Feng Yanran's cries, Ajur and the other two finally knew what had happened. This morning, Feng Yanran got up very early. After she got up, she wanted to go to the kitchen to make breakfast for everyone. She didn't expect to meet Mildy, who also got up early. Needless to say, when the two met they quarreled again. Feng Yanran didn't quarrel with Mildy. She tried very hard to tell Mildy that she didn't have any romantic feelings for O'Brien and would never intervene between them. Unfortunately, Mildy didn't believe her, and the quarrel became more and more intense. While quarreling, Mildy used her hand and was about to slap Feng Yanran's face. At this time, O'Brien, who was attracted by the quarrel, saw that his sweetheart was about to be slapped. How could he bear it? He directly used magic to mercilessly hit Mildy's back. At that time, O'Brien only saw that Feng Yanran was bullied and lost his mind for a moment. He didn't show any mercy until he saw that Mildy was seriously injured and lying on the ground. Only then did he know that he had made a big mistake. Not to mention that if Mildy died in his hands, her family would not let him go. Just the school alone would not accept him. The students of Notre Dame du Starlight were not allowed to hurt each other. He had seriously injured a classmate, so he would definitely be severely punished. Maybe he would even face the danger of being expelled. After calming down, O'Brien prayed in his heart that Mildy must be alive no matter how much he didn't like her. As long as she was alive, he would be fine. O'Brien knew how much Mildy loved him. He knew that as long as Mildy was alive, she would never let him be embarrassed by her family and be expelled from the school. As one of the main characters of this incident, Feng Yanran was also scared to death. She didn't think that O'Brien would hurt Mildy so much. If Mildy died and the news spread to the school, she could imagine what her reputation would be like. Feng Yanran also complained about O'Brien in her heart. She didn't want her hard-earned good reputation to be ruined because of this kind of gossip. Alright, you two can leave first. O'Brien, you can discuss your matters after Mildy wakes up. Ajur was very disdainful of O'Brien. For the sake of a woman he had just met, he had attacked his fiancée, who had helped him a lot. He had no good impression of such an ungrateful man. Riot and Emogwei felt the same way. The three of them chased Feng Yanran and O'Brien out before trying to find a way to treat Mildy's injuries with life potions. Fortunately, the potions in their hands were of high quality, and Mildy managed to keep her life. After Mildy woke up, O'Brien went to look for her alone. No one knew what they talked about, but in the end, Mildy expressed that she would not pursue the matter of O'Brien hurting her. After Mildy expressed that she would not pursue the matter, O'Brien was relieved. He did not even look at Mildy and chased after Feng Yinran every day. This time, Mildy did not look for Feng Yinran to make a scene. She was very calm. Seeing that Mildy did not look for trouble, both Feng Yinran and O'Brien breathed a sigh of relief. However, Ajur felt that Mildy's attitude was very strange. He had a feeling that something big was going to happen. However, Ajur did not intend to interfere. In any case, this was a matter between the three of them. It had nothing to do with an outsider like him. As long as they did not disturb the others, they could do whatever they wanted. He did not care. At times like this, Ajur missed Mingxi very much. With Mingxi around, he didn't have to worry about these things. Since Riot and O'Brien were in the same grade, his words didn't seem to have any effect in front of O'Brien and Mildy, so it was even more impossible for him, a junior in the first grade, to interfere with the matters of the second grade. Senior Mingxi Xiaowu, the two of you should come back quickly. Watching others act out a sadomasochistic love triangle in front of you all day long, don't feel too sour. Mingxi and Fengwu, who were being talked about by Ajur, were teleported into one emperor's tomb after another. Fengwu's luck was not bad. Later, when she encountered a few emperor's tombs, she was able to successfully save the emperor's soul. She also saved the people who died in the tomb. In the past few days, she had sent many souls to reincarnate. She did not encounter a more dangerous dungeon like the Sand Emperor's tomb. Of course, those emperor's tombs were not good places. It was just that it was easier to clear them. Fengwu felt relaxed because she had Pure Sword, the emperor's spirit, and other spirits by her side. The others were not so lucky. Every time they fell into a new map, it was a fight to the death. In the emperor's tomb, there were either zombies or traps. If they were not careful and accidentally killed by the zombies, they would die in these traps. Fengwu did not know how many souls she had sent away. One day, when she was teleported again, she was actually teleported into a palace made of crystal. The blue crystal palace had a watery luster and a trace of mystery. It was very beautiful and dazzling. The crystal palace was located on a beautiful island. Outside the island was blue sea water. On the island, there were many mysterious plants that had never been seen in the outside world. This place was not just any other place. It was the real tomb of the sea god. Those who survived until the end were all teleported here. Everyone looked at each other with a hint of wariness in their eyes. The most precious thing in the sea god's tomb was undoubtedly the divine weapon used by the sea god. The other thing was the sea god's divinity. Humans with excellent talent could condense divinity on their own. However, most people did not have such high talent. If these people wanted to become gods, there was only one way, and that was to find a way to obtain a divinity. As long as they fused with the divinity, they could truly become gods. However, fusing with the divinity required a long time. It was not something that could be done in a day or two. Many people came for the sea god's divinity. The sea god's divinity was the divinity of a teacher. This kind of divinity was much stronger than the divinity of an acquired god. If they could successfully fuse with it, not only could they become gods, they could also become the new sea god. From then on, they could step onto the peak of life. Those who had survived to the end all knew that there were no weaklings who had reached the end. Now everyone was an opponent, and even friends who had a good relationship with them couldn't completely trust them. The temptation of divine deity and divine artifact was too great. It wasn't something that ordinary people could resist. Fengwu, that's great. You're still alive. Shouzo brought Yuan, and the butler to Fengwu. Shouzo's face was still filled with a surprised smile. Shouzo had always been worried about Fengwu, a friend who had taken care of him. Fortunately, the people he cared about were all fine. Elisa was fine, Fengwu was fine, Yuan, and the housekeeper were also alive and well. As for his brother Caesar, he believed that with his brother's ability and luck, it would be impossible for anything to happen to him. He was most at ease with his brother. Chapter 419. Fengwu raised her head when she heard the voice. She did not expect to meet Caesar, who she had been separated from for a long time. Fengwu was about to say something when she realized that someone was waving at her from not far away. The people waving at her were Margaret and her sister. The siblings were fine and seemed to be in good spirits. It seemed like they had not suffered much. Mingxi walked over at this moment. When she left the Sand Country, she had been separated from Mingxi. After that, they did not meet again in the few teleportations. Finally meeting Mingxi, Fengwu's eyes lit up. Her lips curled up as she waved at Mingxi. Zicheng and Irene, the original female lead and supporting female lead, were naturally fine. Both of them had gold fingers. Although the journey was very dangerous, the two of them did not suffer any injuries. Elisa's luck was also very good. Every time she was teleported, she would be sent to someone she knew. She would be sent to Caesar's side or Irene's side. There were even a few times when she was teleported to her own servant. However, she only met Shozo once. Shozo and the butler were teleported together, and Elisa was also teleported to the same tomb. This was also the only time the two of them met in a tomb. After that they did not meet again. However, there were so many emperors' tombs in this tomb of the gods. It was very normal for the two of them not to meet again. Not everyone was like Zicheng and Caesar, who were blessed by the god of fate. At least 3 out of 5 times, they would be teleported together. Eve and Rika were also very lucky to survive. The two of them were also very lucky. Every time they fell into an emperor's tomb, there would be many powerhouses. With powerhouses at the front, the two of them did not suffer any injuries. They just followed along and gained experience until the end. When they entered the tomb of the gods, tens of thousands of people rushed in together. However, only 200 to 300 people made it to the end. It was only because Fengwu had cleared the murderous aura in the tomb that so many people had managed to survive. If they hadn't met Fengwu, other than those who were extremely powerful or had cheats, the others wouldn't even have had the chance to survive. This island was very big, and the palaces on the island were exceptionally dazzling under the sunlight, emitting rays of holy light. Everyone looked enviously at the glittering crystal palace under the sunlight. They couldn't wait to rush in and search for the treasures. At the same time, most people did the same. Hadn't they been waiting for this moment after going through so many hardships? Now that the treasure was right in front of him, if he didn't take it now, when would he? The crystal palace was decorated magnificently. In the middle of the palace was a huge crystal throne. On the throne sat a man who was twice as tall as a person. The man's face was rough, and his face exuded an aura of authority. Even though he wasn't breathing or having a heartbeat, just looking at him made people want to kneel down and kowtow to him. It was as if he was a high and mighty god, and they didn't even have the qualifications to look at him directly. There was no need to explain the identity of this man. 2 words appeared in everyone's mind at the same time. Sea God. This man was the master of the tomb of the gods, the sea god. Mortals couldn't look directly at the face of a god. They only had to look at him once, and they had the illusion that they were about to explode and die. Fengwu and the others carefully looked away, avoiding looking directly at the face of the sea god. They sized up the sea god, this innate god once again. He wore a crown made of gold and gems on his head as he sat on the throne. The clothes on the sea god's body were very extraordinary. They couldn't tell what material it was made of, but they understood that it was definitely not a material that could be obtained in the human world. There were all kinds of magic tools on his clothes. He wore more than a dozen necklaces around his neck, and each one was different. There were more than a dozen bracelets on each hand. From buttons to brooches to belts and accessories, almost half of the sea god's body was hung on his clothes. If it wasn't inconvenient to wear these things on his feet, Fengwu and the others had reason to believe that the sea god would definitely wear these accessories on his feet. So this is the sea god? Are you kidding me? Why does he have the temperament of a nouveau riche? Are you sure this guy isn't just another trick that the sea god came up with? No one would believe that the guy who had hung himself like a human-shaped Christmas tree after his death was the sea god when they first saw him. Don't think I'm fooled just because I'm not well educated. This guy must be a fake. That was what most people were thinking. Only a few people with sharp eyes noticed that the things hanging on the sea god's body were not ordinary. The lowest grade among them was legendary. The highest grade among them was semi-god equipment. It was unbelievable. Who would have thought that the extremely rare legendary and semi-god equipment of the Heavenly Wind continent would be hung all over the sea god's body like ordinary accessories. Lu Wuji's eyes burned passionately as he looked at the rare treasures hanging on the sea god's body. He made up his mind to grab as many as he could. As the crowd was hesitating whether they should go up and grab the treasures, the sea god suddenly opened his eyes. As soon as he opened his eyes, everyone took a huge step back in shock. The sea god opened his eyes, which were as blue as the ocean. His eyes did not seem to have any life. The sea god glanced at Mingxi, Lu Wuji, and Caesar. The three were startled. Being stared at by a god like that, they felt like they were being stared at by the god of death. As the three were still in shock, a key flew out from each of their bodies. The three keys emitted a golden glow as they flew toward the sea god. A blue gem then flew out from the sea god's body. Then, under the crowd's gaze, the three keys merged with the blue gem. Gradually, a scepter appeared in front of everyone. The scepter was golden in color, with a huge blue gem embedded in it. The scepter was surrounded by golden vines, giving it a mysterious and alluring appearance. When the scepter was formed, the aura of the god weapon suppressed the crowd. It was the semi-god equipment, the sea god's scepter. Legend had it that the sea god's scepter was the weapon of the sea god. It was supposed to be a god weapon. Unfortunately, the sea god's scepter was heavily damaged during the Great Battle, dropping from a god weapon to a semi-god equipment. Although it was a semi-god equipment, it was not impossible to restore it to a god weapon. However, it would take a long time to do so. Although a semi-god equipment was not as precious as a god weapon, it was still a rare existence in the Heavenly Wind continent. Currently, only a few super factions possessed a semi-god equipment. These factions treated their semi-god equipment as their greatest treasure. Unless they encountered a calamity that forced them to use their semi-god equipment. Most of the time, the semi-god equipment was more like a spiritual symbol that was kept in a secret room of the faction. Even the disciples of the faction might not be able to see one in their lifetime. Chapter 420. Now that the sea god's semi-divine weapon was right in front of them, how could they not be excited? Fengwu quietly stayed by Mingxi's side. She had no interest in the sea god's body that was covered in ornaments. This girl didn't care much about sacred or divine weapons. She already had Xiaochun, so other weapons were useless to her. Fengwu girl didn't plan on fighting for these useless things. Fengwu was the only one who thought this way. Most of the people were already rubbing their hands and waiting to strip the sea god naked. They might not even leave the sea god's underwear behind. A bunch of idiots. My baby, who was originally sitting quietly on Fengwu's head, suddenly opened its mouth and said a few words. Fengwu was a little confused. She touched the eggshell on baby's head in confusion. The sea god is famous for being stingy. He won't give away his things to others. Just wait and see. These people who want to steal the sea god's things are going to be in trouble. Baby's voice was filled with schadenfreude. The sea god's divine items were famous for being bad. If he was a kind god, he wouldn't have used the mortal emperor's tomb to protect his god's tomb. So if this guy really thought that the sea god was so generous, he was gravely mistaken. Baby and Fengwu's conversation was only through consciousness transmission, so the others didn't hear it. Fengwu knew that baby was very smart. Fengwu girl always believed what it said. After all, baby had never been wrong. She grabbed Mingxi's hand and held it tightly, not letting go no matter what. Mingxi thought that she was afraid. Instead, he gently patted the back of her hand with his other hand to make her relax a little. Other than Fengwu, there was another person who wasn't interested in the sea god's things. It was Xiazhua. Xiazhua only had one goal in entering the god's tomb, and that was the Heart of Water. He had to obtain the Heart of Water, and could not let it fall into Zicheng's hands. Xiazhua had already heard about the location of the Heart of Water from Zicheng's friends. He had already made up his mind. When these people started fighting over the treasures, he would seize the opportunity to obtain the Heart of Water. The location of the Heart of Water was very special. It wasn't in the main hall, but in the lotus pond outside the main hall. The Heart of Water was hidden in the lotus pond. Zicheng's friend said that after Zicheng entered the tomb of the god of sin, she directly fell into this lotus pond. When she waved her hand in the water, she accidentally grabbed a cold and soft thing. When she picked it up, she realized that it was the legendary Heart of Water. This Heart of Water should have been formed not long ago. If it hadn't grown up in the sea god's tomb and absorbed the weak divinity occasionally emitted by the sea god, this Heart of Water wouldn't have given birth to sentience so early. Yes, the Heart of Water that Zicheng picked up had sentience. Although it was weak, it still had its own consciousness. Although he didn't know why Zicheng didn't fall into the lotus pond, he couldn't miss this opportunity. He had to take advantage of the chaos to obtain the Heart of Water. Just as Xiazhua made up his mind, someone finally couldn't resist the temptation and made a move. The first person to make a move rushed forward and extended his hand to grab a demigod artifact from the sea god's body. When their hand approached the sea god's body, the sea god's body suddenly emitted a soft blue light. When the blue light appeared, the person who made the first move flew out one by one as if they were hit by something. Sure enough, it wasn't easy to take something from the sea god's body. Although the sea god had been dead for 10,000 years, it wasn't easy to succeed. Ah, damn it! The people who were sent flying all screamed and cursed. This attack made them regain their senses. These people finally understood that they weren't facing the corpse of an ordinary person, but the body of a sea god. Even if the consciousness of this body had disappeared, just the divinity of this body wasn't something they could mess around with. No one noticed that when the sea god launched this attack, a figure disappeared from the hall. Everyone stared at the sea god with rapt attention, afraid that she would make her next move. Fortunately, the sea god didn't do anything else after this attack. She still sat there with her eyes closed and her scepter in her hand, as if she was asleep. After this battle, the people who wanted to make a move didn't dare to. However, Mingxi knew that the current peace was only temporary. No one could resist the temptation of these semi-divine tools. For the sake of their desires, it was only a matter of time before they rushed forward to snatch food from the tiger's mouth. As he thought, after 5 minutes of peace, some people could no longer hold themselves back and charged forward again. The number of people who charged forward was even greater than the first time. These people had come prepared. They had already used all kinds of methods to protect themselves from the sea god's attack. A group of people yelled and charged at the sea god. Their eyes were filled with greed. Another blue light flashed. Most people were already prepared, so not many people were hit by the attack. Most of them managed to escape the attack. A few lucky ones even managed to grab an accessory from the sea god's body. It's a sacred weapon. I'm also someone who has a saint artifact. A man shouted loudly. It's a legendary weapon, why isn't it a semi-divine tool? Someone grumbled. Why didn't I get anything? The people who didn't manage to get anything were even more dissatisfied. After someone made a good start, everyone's passion was aroused. They were more enthusiastic than ever about grabbing something from the sea god's body. They all charged forward recklessly, trying to grab a piece of treasure from the sea god's body, even if it was just an ordinary piece of legendary equipment. That being said, even the most ordinary items were only comparable to the sea god's other possessions. A piece of legendary equipment was priceless in the outside world. The crowd almost went crazy trying to snatch something from the sea god's body. Mingxi pulled Fengwu to the side and hid. He did not join the crowd. His identity was noble, and he had seen countless treasures since he was young. Why would he want to compete with these people? Irene and Zicheng also joined the crowd. Even though there were so many people trying to snatch the sea god's equipment, only a few succeeded. Most people were knocked flying before they could even touch the corner of the sea god's clothes. Meanwhile, those who managed to snatch the sea god's equipment ended up as the targets of the others. A battle of life and death took place in the hall for the precious magic equipment. The clean hall was soon dyed red with blood. The air was filled with the smell of blood. To everyone's surprise, no one had died at the hands of the sea god, but at the hands of their own kind instead. The greed of human nature was magnified. Chapter 421. Fresh blood splattered across the hall. The sea god sat on the throne with an expressionless face. His eyes were still closed like a puppet. However, As the smell of blood in the hall grew stronger, the sea god's heart began to beat rapidly. The heartbeat was not loud, so the people who were busy competing for the treasures did not notice it. Only a few people who did not participate in the chaotic battle noticed the anomaly. Immediately, the faces of the people who noticed the anomaly changed, and they all took a few steps back. Meanwhile, the people who were fighting over the magic equipment were still busy fighting over the advanced magic equipment that was rarely seen in the outside world. It's mine. The half-martial tool is mine. Give it to me. I saw it first. Don't even think about taking it from me, it's mine. Hand over the half-martial tool, or I'll kill you. Thump 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 thump. The heartbeat grew heavier. Even the people who were blinded by the benefits before them finally heard it. What's that sound? Someone asked in fear. It sounds like a heartbeat. Yeah, it's a heartbeat. It's coming from the sea god's body. Could it be that the sea god is still alive? This guess successfully scared a lot of people. Stop guessing. The sea god is already dead. If he's still alive, why didn't he return to the realm of the gods? Why did he build a tomb like this in the human world? The person analyzed the situation rationally. That being said, it did make sense. At least, no one dared to question the sea god's survival anymore. But what's going on? Why would a dead person have a heartbeat? The heartbeat continued to grow louder and more frequent. For some reason, they felt like their hearts were beating faster too. That's right. Why would a dead person have a heartbeat? Everyone knew that the heart would only start beating when a person was alive. Once a person died, their heart would stop beating too. It was impossible for them to still have a heartbeat. Yeah, this is too strange. Why is it like this? The crowd could not figure it out. No one dared to go forward to compete for the magic equipment after being frightened by the heartbeat. Everyone took a few steps back in unison. No one dared to go any closer. Their eyes were filled with uneasiness, which grew stronger as the heartbeat grew louder. Ah, why is this happening, my heart? It hurts. Stop it. Don't beat anymore, it hurts. As the heartbeat grew louder and louder, everyone present suddenly clutched their chests. Their faces turned pale as they fell to the ground in cold sweat. They felt their heartbeats getting faster and faster, as if their hearts were about to explode. It hurt, it really hurt. The shadow of death suddenly descended, and everyone lost their minds at this moment. Mingxi and Fengwu did not fall to the ground like everyone else, but the two of them were not much better. Their heartbeats were obviously several times faster than normal. If this continued, their hearts would definitely overload, and everyone would die here. Mingxi had the blood of a god. Although he did not have a god body, the sea god's heart could still affect him. The effect was much smaller than the others. Aside from his pale face and bloodless lips, he was not in unbearable pain like the others. Fengwu did not look well either. Fengwu was just an ordinary person. She did not have the blood of a god to protect her body. Although she had a divine weapon like the pure sword, the pure sword's function was to purify. It had no effect on other things. The damage she suffered was definitely much greater than Mingxi's. Her heart was about to explode. The pure sword emitted a faint white light to protect her heart, but it still could not completely relieve her of the pain. The sea god did not have any evil power. The pure sword could not attack anything that was not within its purification range. Mingxi looked at Fengwu's pained expression. He knew that if he did not act now, Fengwu and the others would die here. He used the pure sword to support himself on the ground and slowly stood up. He had to do something to stop the heartbeat. Remove the seal. Just as Mingxi wanted to do something to stop the sea god, two voices suddenly sounded. Suddenly, two voices rang out beside him, surprising him. These two voices were very familiar to him. They were the Margaret siblings. Mingxi turned his head and saw that there were two different patterns between the siblings' eyebrows. A pink peach blossom mark appeared between Margaret's eyebrows, while a camellia mark appeared between Matson's eyebrows. The siblings' bodies had also undergone a huge change. Firstly, they no longer looked like how they usually did. Margaret had a playful smile on her face. She was wearing a long white dress and had cute pink hair. A green staff fell from the sky into her hands. There seemed to be many strange flowers and herbs engraved on the staff. This was the 100-flower staff, the divine weapon of the god of spring. Matsson's appearance had also changed from a young man, who could only be considered decent, to a handsome young man with brown hair. He was wearing a magic robe, and the long sword in his hand had also disappeared. Right now he was holding a golden staff in his hand. This staff was completely golden, and there was an image of golden leaves engraved on it. Each leaf seemed to have a strange power. This was the divine weapon that represented the autumn god. Falling leaves. Spring flower autumn moon. Margaret's pink lips parted slightly. As she said these 4 words, a gentle breeze suddenly appeared in the hall. The wind seemed to carry peach blossoms that flew towards the sea god. The sea god's originally tightly shut eyes opened at this moment. There were still no emotions in his eyes. His gaze was numb, and he looked like a puppet. This was not surprising. No matter how awesome he looked, it could not change the fact that he was already a dead man. How could a dead man show any emotions in his eyes? Autumn, take these people and leave first. Margaret's brows furrowed slightly as she spoke to Matsson, without even turning her head. Okay, Phaser, be careful. After Matsson replied, he waved the staff in his hand. Everyone in the hall disappeared, including Mingxi and Fengwu. Matsson leaped lightly off the ground. Just as he was about to leave, he suddenly sensed something. He slowly descended from the sky and landed beside the lotus pond in the garden. Shozo held the heart of water in his hand excitedly. He had finally done it. The heart of water. He had finally succeeded in stopping Zicheng from obtaining this treasure that was related to the future of mankind. This time, he could not let Zicheng obtain it. Not only the heart of water, but also the hearts of metal, fire, earth, wood and wood. He would not let someone like Zicheng obtain them. Chapter 422. At that moment, Xiazhua finally had some confidence in changing the direction of the future. He had returned to 100 years ago, because he was afraid that he couldn't change the future. If the future couldn't be changed, then his rebirth would be meaningless. Fortunately, the future could be changed, and he finally did it. The butler and Yuan were also very excited. They were people who truly cared about Xiazhua. Before entering the tomb, Xiazhua had already told them that the heart of water could improve Xiazhua's body. In their minds, as long as Xiazhua obtained the heart of water, he could change his talent and no longer have to look at the so-called geniuses in the family. It's the heart of water. So the heart of water is in a place like this. A faint voice suddenly came from behind the 3 of them. There was someone. The 3 of them turned around and saw a handsome man holding a staff looking at the heart of water in Xiazhua's hand. His eyes had a trace of surprise, but there was no greed. Who are you? What do you want? The butler and Yuan stared at the young man, as if they were facing a great enemy. To be able to appear behind them without them noticing. The 2 of them didn't dare to underestimate the young man's strength. It was too strange. A person with such strength should be very eye-catching. Why had they never seen him among those people? The 2 of them couldn't figure it out, but they didn't dare to relax. Autumn Sage. Xiazhua saw the appearance of the person and sighed in relief. He didn't recognize the man in front of him now, but 100 years later he would. This man was one of the 4 seasons Saint Emissaries, the Autumn Saint Emissary who represented autumn. The Autumn Saint Emissary was the successor of the Mid-Autumn Divine Seal. He controlled the divine weapon, the Fallen Leaves Divine Staff. Legend has it that the Autumn Saint came from the ancient Eastern country. He was an orphan who grew up in a temple. Later on, when he was 12 years old, the divine mark of autumn from the upper realm resonated with him and descended upon his body. From then on, an ordinary orphan became the successor of the divine mark and one of the 4 sages of Star Temple. Among the 4 seasoned sages, Autumn should be the oldest. He should be 23 years old now, and officially took over the responsibility of the Autumn Sage. In his previous life, in order to prevent the destruction of the world, the Saint of Autumn used her own body to repair the cracks in space, buying more time for all humans to think of a way to resolve the danger of the world's destruction. It could be said that without the sacrifice of the Autumn Saint, the world would have been destroyed before he could return to the past. Xiazhua was full of admiration for such a person who was willing to sacrifice himself to save the world. You know me? Autumn did not expect that someone would recognize him. He had taken over the position of saint for 2 years, and was the only one of the 2 Four-Seasons saints who had officially taken up the position. Although he had solved many problems in the past 2 years, there were not many people who had seen him before. How did this young man know that it was him? Of course, Xiazhua couldn't answer this question. He couldn't tell anyone that he was reborn from the future. The fewer people who knew, the better. Fortunately, the situation was urgent and Autumn did not have the time to ask such a small question. Forget it, let's not talk about it for now. You guys leave with me first. With a wave of his staff, before the 3 of them could react, they had already appeared in a special space. This space was filled with many villages and camellias. Many people were sitting under a large tree, each of them clutching their chests, as if they had suffered heavy injuries. Xiao's heart tightened, and he hurriedly searched for Kaiser, Elisa, and the others in the crowd. Outside the sea god's tomb, Ajur suddenly felt 2 holy auras break through the sky and rush into the sea, entering the sea god's tomb. Ajur's eyes widened. This aura, could it be them? Not long after the 2 auras appeared, a handsome man with brown hair broke through the water's surface. He slowly flew out of the water and landed on Ajur's ship. Who are you? Who allowed you to come on the ship? Riot and Emogue's eyes widened nervously as they looked at the newcomer. This person seemed very strong. Heavens, he wasn't here to cause trouble, was he? The 2 of them wailed in their hearts. When the people waiting on the other ships saw someone come out, they immediately looked into the water, hoping that the person they were waiting for would also come out of the water. Unfortunately, they didn't see a single person after waiting for a long time. Why are you here? Ajur had been wondering if it was those 2 fellows. He didn't expect it to be true. Wait a moment. Autumn smiled and waved her staff. Suddenly, a large group of people appeared on Ajur's ship like a human pyramid. There were at least 200 people on the ship. Their ship wasn't that big, so it would be strange if they didn't stack up. Fortunately, Mingxi and Fengwu were lucky. They weren't the ones at the bottom. Senior Mingxi. Riot was very excited. Because of the triangular relationship between O'Brien and the other 2, he was almost mentally and physically exhausted. It wasn't easy for him to see someone who could make decisions. How could he not be happy? If it weren't for the fact that this wasn't the right place, this usually serious youth might have even done a lap dance to celebrate his good fortune. Heavens! Who's on top of me? Get off me immediately. It's so heavy. Whose butt isn't moving? Who the fuck is on top of me? Get off me. Don't push. Get up, it's so heavy. A large number of screams sounded at the same time. Fengwu and Mingxi had been pulled aside by Ajur and the others at the first moment, so they didn't end up like the others. The ships waiting on the side saw this scene and immediately came over to pick them up. Quite a few people boarded the boats that their families were waiting for. But before they left, they all solemnly thanked Autumn for saving their lives. If it weren't for him and the other girl, they would most likely be dead by now. Another group of people waited for the majority to leave before boarding their own ships. They were all deeply grateful for Autumn's life-saving grace. Thanks. As for the Tomb of the Gods, no one wanted to enter it a second time. Finally, after everyone had returned to their own ships, Ajur had a chance to talk to Autumn. Hurry up and tell me. Why are you here? Ajur patted Autumn's chest impolitely. As one of the future 4 saints, he naturally wasn't unfamiliar with this Autumn saint who had already taken office. Let's go in and talk. Autumn smiled helplessly. Ajur's personality was still so impatient. Riot and the others had many things to ask, but they could see that Ajur and this mysterious person had something to talk about. They didn't want to disturb them, so they all got up and left. Feng Yinran wanted to stay and listen to what was going on, but since everyone had left, it wasn't good for her to stay. She could only leave unwillingly. Chapter 423. Through Qiu's explanation, Ajur and Mingxi finally understood why Qiu and Chun were here. So it was the High Priestess who predicted that I would be in danger, and had Qiu and Chun hide by my side. Mingxi did not expect that Qiu and Chun would appear here, because of him. Star Hall's high priestess predicted that he would encounter a calamity. If no one helped him, he would be in great trouble. Although he would not die, his vitality would be greatly damaged. The position of the 4 great emperors was extremely important in the human world. The successors of the 4 great emperors were also protected by the Star Hall. Once the Star Hall discovered that the successor was in danger, they would immediately send people to protect the successor. This was the case this time. When the High Priestess discovered that Ming Shi, the future crown prince of the Silvermoon Ancient Kingdom, might encounter some unexpected danger, she immediately sent 2 sacred emissaries to protect him. This was why the 2 of them disguised themselves as siblings and met Ming Shi by chance. In order to not let Ming Shi discover their identities, the sacred emissary of spring, Scarlet, and sacred emissary of autumn, Magia, spent a lot of effort. When Ming Shi's soul was sucked into the island of death, they almost could not help but rush in to save him. Fortunately, after contacting the High Priestess and learning that Ming Shi's calamity was not here, the 2 of them gave up on the idea and waited for Ming Shi to return from the island of death. Fortunately, they did manage to wait until the end. Ming Shi had indeed returned alive. After knowing that Margaret were his future colleagues, Spring and Autumn, Ajur was dumbfounded. These 2 had been hiding under his nose for so long without him noticing. Although he had long suspected that the siblings were sent by the Star Hall, he did not expect that the Star Hall would send sacred emissaries. Moreover, they were his future colleagues. This was not a good feeling. After explaining the identities of the 2 people, a huge water column suddenly appeared in the sea. The water column was several feet high and looked majestic. After the water column appeared, it disappeared in a few breaths of time. However, it caused many nearby ships to overturn because of the sound. Fortunately, no one was injured. When the water column disappeared, a pink-haired girl in a white dress appeared in the air. The 100-flower staff in her hand had disappeared. Her beautiful figure slowly descended from the sky and landed on Ming Shi's ship, causing many to speculate about her identity. Phew, it's finally done. Scarlet walked into the cabin with a relaxed expression. What did you do with the sea god? Ajur was familiar with Scarlet. He asked as soon as he saw her come in. Ming Shi had already explained what they might have encountered in the sea god's tomb. Ming Shi's storytelling ability was much better than Feng Wu's. With Ming Shi's simple words, the thrilling scene of the battle appeared in front of Ajur's eyes. He broke out in a cold sweat on their behalf. Nothing much. I just sealed the sea god's tomb again. I don't think anyone will be able to find it this time. Scarlet blinked nonchalantly and said playfully, the tomb of the sea god had been sealed once more. As expected of the 4 Seasons' holy envoy, Ajur could not reseal the tomb of the sea god as he was now. Hearing that the core of the tomb had been sealed, Ming Shi breathed a sigh of relief. The sea god's tomb was too dangerous. It was better to keep it hidden in the sea forever. Feng Wu was worried about the king's spirit and the others. The king's spirit wanted to save the souls of the other kings, so he did not reincarnate. She did not know how they were doing now. Don't worry about Xiao Wu. They've already reincarnated. Bao Bao sat on Feng Wu's head and sent a message to Feng Wu. That's good. Knowing that the king's spirit and the others had reincarnated, Feng Wu breathed a sigh of relief. As long as they were fine, she was relieved. As early as the last stage of the Tomb of the Gods, Bao Bao had already let the spirit of kings and the others reincarnate. They were all spirits and should have been reincarnated long ago. But because of the selfishness of the sea god, they had suffered for 10,000 years in this world. Now at the last stage, the spirit of kings and the others could no longer help. No matter how strong a spirit was, it did not have any advantage in front of a god. Not only that, their spirits would also be harmed by the god's aura. Since there was no use for them to stay, Bao Bao decided to let the king's spirit and the others reincarnate. Fortunately, they had left quickly. Otherwise, it was hard to say whether they would have been sealed together with the sea god. Right this, Phaser said as she took out a golden staff with sapphires from her space ring. Ming Shi and Feng Wu understood at a glance. Wasn't this the staff of the sea god? It had fallen to the level of a demigod artifact, but it was still a rare treasure. If it was discovered, who knew how many people would fight over it? Phaser took it out to see if Fengwu wanted it. It was a treasure to others, but to Phaser, who had a divine artifact, it held no attraction. Without waiting for her to finish speaking, the sea god's staff turned into a ray of light and flew into the sky. Seeing the demigod artifact disappear, Spring Crimson shrugged. I wanted to give it to Xiaowu to play with, but it looks like that won't be possible. It already has a trace of intelligence. Divine artifacts with intelligence will take responsibility for their masters. It looks like it's gone to find a new master, Moria said. Fengwu didn't feel anything special about losing a demigod artifact like the sea god's staff, even if she knew that Phaser had originally wanted to give it to her to play with. The curtains were finally drawn on the sea god's tomb. Ajur told Mingxi about the return of Feng Yanran and the others, but Mingxi didn't comment on their return. He would only report the trio's performance to the academy as it was. As for how the academy would deal with them, that wasn't something Mingxi cared about. Standing at the entrance of Notre Dame du Starlight, Riot felt as if he'd been reborn. Along the way, he'd encountered countless disasters, both big and small, and the trio who were experts at tricking their teammates. He really felt that the only reason he'd come back alive was because he'd been too successful as a magician in his past life. We're finally back. We're going to have a big meal later to get over the shock. Riot felt that eating more was the only way to recover the courage he'd lost from excessive worry. I want to go too. Senior Riot, you don't mind treating us juniors to a meal, right? Ajur didn't forget to help him and Fengwu. Fengwu, yummy food. Riot's mouth twitched. The meal opposite them seemed a little expensive, but he wasn't a stingy person. Though he felt a little pained about the money, he still nodded and agreed to treat them. Chapter 424. It didn't seem right to only invite Ajur and Fengwu, so he asked the others if they wanted to eat together. As expected, Mingxi, Feng Yanran, and the other two said they had something to do, but Mo Gui agreed without hesitation. After entering the school, everyone said their goodbyes and went back to their own dorms to tidy up. Feng Wu led Xiao Yi into the dormitory with the key. The dormitory was very clean, and it was obvious that someone had cleaned it. Sure enough, when Silda heard the door open and came downstairs, his eyes lit up when he saw Fengwu. Even Anika had returned to the dorm. The three girls sat together, making tea, chatting, and eating snacks. Xiaowu, why are you only back now? Classes will officially start in 2 days. Most of the people who are supposed to go back to school are already back, except for you and Rika. We couldn't get in touch with you, so we were worried that something might have happened to you that affected your return to school. Anika ate the snacks Fengwu brought back from Falling Jade Island, her face full of satisfaction. The snacks were delicious, crispy, sweet, and fragrant. She had to give it a thumbs up. We went to the tomb of the god of sin. Fengwu gnawed on a snack like a little squirrel, her eating speed as fast as ever. The tomb of the god of sin. The tomb of the sea god that's been the talk of the town. I heard that it's very dangerous, and many people have died there. Why would you want to go to such a dangerous place? Tell us what happened on your way there. Silda was clearly very curious about what had happened to Fengwu's group. Fengwu didn't have a talent for storytelling, so the story from her mouth wasn't very entertaining. It was like reading a poem without any emotional fluctuations. Still, Silda and Annika listened with keen interest. Did you meet Rika in the tomb of the god of sin? Anika drank her fruit tea. Fengwu thought for a moment. I met her once, but I didn't see her again. Fengwu had gone through several instances of the tomb of the god of sin, but she had only met Rika once. She'll be fine, right? Anika asked worriedly. Although Rika had a bad personality, was competitive, and was very arrogant, she and Anika were still close because they were in the same department in class. Rika hadn't come back yet, and Anika was the one who was most worried about her. It's okay, he's still alive, Fengwu said seriously. The corner of Annika's mouth twitched. She was relieved as long as he was alive. After chatting with Zilda and the others for a while, Fengwu brought Xiao Yi to Elliot's dinner party. Xiao Yi was held in Fengwu's arms, and his black eyes were wide open. Little White followed closely behind Fengwu. When they arrived, Riot and Mo Gui and Ajur were already waiting for them. Fengwu had been delayed by chatting with her roommates, So the three of them had arrived more than 10 minutes ago. They had even ordered the dishes. Xiao Wu, come and sit. I've already ordered your favorite dishes. Ajur waved. Mo Gui's mouth twitched. Was there anything Fengwu didn't like to eat? She didn't seem to be a picky eater. Riot couldn't be bothered with them, and asked the waiter to serve the dishes. There were only 4 of them, but they had ordered more than 20 dishes. They were determined to eat. Fengwu's heart suddenly skipped a beat. She felt a malicious gaze fixed on her from behind. She turned around, but didn't see anything. She ignored it and sat down to eat. In a private room that Fengwu couldn't see, Eve was glaring at Fengwu through the door. Eve was looking for a chance to take out Fengwu in the tomb of the god of sin, but she never had the chance. Their group had encountered a great danger during the trip to the tomb of the god of sin. Luckily, they were saved by a mysterious person in the end. However, the mysterious person had stayed on Fengwu's boat after saving them. Eve was extremely displeased by it. Why would someone so powerful be friends with Fengwu? Even though she had met a lot of people that she rarely met, Eve was well aware of her family's background. They were only willing to talk to her because of Zicheng. If it weren't for Zicheng, no one would bother with a daughter of a small clan like her. Even though she was never jealous of Zicheng's popularity, she was unwilling to lose to someone like Fengwu, who she had always looked down on. Rika had also survived the trip to the tomb of the god of sin. She was lucky enough to find a legendary magic ring suitable for a water magician. The ring was not given to her by Zicheng. Rika was lucky enough to find it. Eve had also found a legendary defensive necklace suitable for her. Zicheng had given it to Eve. Eve was happy to wear the necklace for a few days. Zicheng had found a half-magic level crown. It was an accessory worn by the god of sea. Zicheng had managed to snatch it. It was quite a shocking haul. It should be known that for many people who entered the divine tomb, it was already a miracle for them to be able to survive safely, let alone bring out so many good things. If the 3 of them were to tell others about their harvest, they would definitely be envied to death. Eve, what are you looking at? Rika glanced in the direction Eve was looking at. I'm looking at someone I hate, Eve said in a disgusted tone. Eve, stop it. Fengwu isn't a bad person. Why do you hate her so much? Zicheng said helplessly. Zicheng already knew Eve had a strong grudge against Fengwu, even though the grudge seemed to come out of nowhere. I just can't stand her pretending to be innocent. She's hanging out with these men every day, yet she still pretends to be innocent. It's so disgusting. Eve poured herself a glass of wine and downed half of it in a single gulp. Zicheng pulled her hand down to stop her from drinking. Don't drink so much, we still have to go back to school. I know. Eve put down the glass and didn't continue drinking. If you don't like her, then we'll have less contact with her in the future. Don't think of ways to deal with Fengwu. She's still our classmate. If you make a move on her for no reason, the school won't let you off. Zicheng softly persuaded. Rika's eyes darkened. Zicheng is right. If you make a move on her, then you'll be implicated. It's not worth it. But I just can't accept it. I don't want to let her go. I want her to die. Eve didn't hide her killing intent towards Fengwu. Eve had never been a forgiving person. If it weren't for the fact that Zicheng had the favorability system, their friendship would have capsized long ago, as Zicheng became more and more popular. Because of the favorability system's absolute control, Eve couldn't have any other thoughts towards Zicheng. She couldn't have any negative feelings towards Zicheng. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.